I've got the YouTube thing open. I'm waiting for it to pop.
Live.
In 5,
Live.
4.
We're live.
Are we live? I got the YouTube thing open. Oh, all right. Yes, we are live. I see it.
Fresh. Woohoo.
I got it. All right.
Ah.
Hello, everybody.
Hi,
We're
people.
live here in our homes. Welcome, everybody who's watching at home. My name is Alan. I'm a local 600 camera assistant in Chicago. And this is the union discussion panel hosted by the DePaul Society of Cinematographers and the DCC. Thank you to both those organizations for helping us put this together. This is really cool. Thank you also especially to Nahal and Miles from the DePaul Society of Cinematographers for helping us put this together. Nahal especially for setting up the YouTube stream, all that stuff. So thank you guys, and thank you all to the speakers as well, all of our panelists for taking time out of your very busy schedules to come join us here.
So tough.
I want to just, before I introduce all the panelists, I have a couple quick kind of housekeeping notes for everybody who's watching at home. First and foremost, if there are any technical issues with the stream, please let us know in the YouTube comments. I have the comments here in front of me, so I can see them. So if you hate this discussion, please be sure to let me know. We're gonna start with the discussion with our panelists, and then we'll move into answering questions that were submitted online. We had close to 100 questions submitted online, which is awesome. We're gonna do our best to get to as many as possible. We also want to give people an opportunity to submit questions via the YouTube stream. We're going to try and delegate that to a specific portion of the discussion towards the end. So if you have questions, open up a Word document, open up a notes tab or any kind of text editor, write them down so you have them ready to go. And then when we get to that portion, feel free, throw them into that YouTube into the YouTube chat, and we will get to answer them, and we'll get to pose them to the panelists. It's also worth mentioning, I did want to mention that all the panelists here are members of their respective unions. We have members from Local 476 and Local 600. However, I do want to put a caveat. Nobody here is an official union representative, meaning that everything that we say is our opinions. So please don't call the union and say, well, Alan told me that this is the way that you guys do it, and he's an official union representative. I'm not an official union rep. Nobody here is, at least I assume nobody here is an official union rep. So we're all just giving our opinions, and hopefully they're good opinions. And with that being said, these are all of our opinions, and I think everybody here would implore everybody listening to go seek as much information out as possible about the things that we're talking about. Don't take any of our words as fact. Don't ever get one opinion on the matter. Talk to as many people as you can, and talk to as many people as possible about any questions you might have. So with that being said, I want to introduce some of our panelists. So first we got Dave Wagner.
Hey,
Dave is a motion picture grip and a key grip in the Studio Mechanics Local 476. He was a core grip on the ABC series Sirens, as well as a grip on 5 seasons of NBC Chicago PD before making the move to key grip. Dave has since been the key grip on all 3 seasons of Showtime's The Chi, as well as being the Chicago unit key grip of the award-winning feature Native Son, which was distributed by HBO. And most recently, he was the key grip on the reshoot unit of the Jordan Peele-produced horror feature Candyman. So Dave, welcome.
that was all right, except for I didn't do season 1 of The Chi.
Oh yeah, all right, 2 and 3.
All of it right, except for that.
That's what I get for writing these things and not telling them to you. So Tasha, hopefully I get you even better. So next is Tasha Major.
Hi.
Tasha started her career as a rigging electrician on the television reboot The Exorcist, and has since been a staff electrician in Local 476 on Amazon's Electric Dreams, Fox's Empire and Proven Innocent, Netflix's Soundtrack, formerly named Mixtape, the Comedy Central series South Side, Candyman, the Jordan Peele feature, and most recently FX's Fargo season 4. She's also had the distinct opportunity to be the second unit gaffer for Proven Innocent, Soundtrack, and Fargo.
Nice.
Great. And then on camera side, we've got Ella Lubienski.
Hi.
Ella began as the camera PA on Empire season 4 while still a senior at DePaul University. She then joined Local 600 as a digital utility and has since advanced up to a second assistant. Ella has day played on such shows as, and this is a real list, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago Med, Empire, Shameless, Easy, The Shy, Southside, Fargo, and Next. Recently, she completed Showtime's Work in Progress season 1 as the B camera second assistant and did a stint on Chicago Fire as the B camera second assistant, as well as just finished off Chicago Med's 5th season as the staff loader. Great. And last but certainly not least, we have Brian Romano.
Hey, guys.
Brian was the A camera second assistant on the Fox series The Exorcist, as well as the A camera second assistant on 3 seasons of NBC's Chicago Fire, before making the jump to camera operator. He's now a Local 600 camera and Steadicam operator in Chicago, and recently was staff on the FX series Mayans as the B camera and Steadicam operator, was shot in Los Angeles.
Good
All
to be
right.
here.
Very good. Thank you guys all for coming. Thank you everybody watching. So let's get started. Dave, I wanted to start with you. We were talking a bit before this panel, and you were talking about how for close to 2 years, you said you were doing indies before you joined the union. How did you, first of all, how did you get involved in sort of set lighting, be it grip or electric? Did you do that all through school, or did you want to be a cinematographer, or
Yeah, I mean, I started at DePaul. I did graduate at DePaul in 2011, and I did all my set work was all lighting, was all like gaffing, or I was shooting a bunch there. And when I was there, I gaffed a thesis film called Lee, which unfortunately never got finished, but it hooked me up with a 476er at the time, now camera operator Scott Thiel, which everyone here obviously knows.
Yeah.
And he brought me up. So he kind of was my point person from like junior year up until honestly even today. I can call him for anything. And he kind of gave me advice and brought me on to sets. And even in my senior year, he would bring me on to like Chicago units of indie movies or small commercials. And he got me my first feature as a key grip, which then turned into another feature, then another one, and eventually that just kind of snowballs. But that's kind of how I got my start. Was I met him, and he kind of led me down a path.
Did you always want to work in the grip department, or was that kind of where you fell, or do you have an affinity for gripping?
I kind of fell into it in a way because in school I went for cinematography. I wanted to shoot. And then while I was there, I fell into lighting because obviously you can't shoot everything. So I got into gaffing, and I was gaffing a ton of projects, which then kind of maybe made me a little more thirsty for the grip electric route. And I was doing nothing but gaffing really for the rest of my time at DePaul when I wasn't shooting my own stuff. But then after school, there's just more jobs doing grip and electric, and I kind of fell into gripping and just kept doing it. And I just fell into actually just loving it more and wanted to pursue that. So that's kind of fun for me.
I want to mention that your first union job, as you and I talked about, was actually, believe it or not, as a set electrician, not as a grip. So what's the story there?
Well, it's kind of, so my first union job, I was actually permit. So my first in the union as a 476er paid was a set electrician, but my first union job was I was permitted to key grip Trapped in the Closet season 3. That's a fun little fact.
That's amazing.
No one in Chicago, no 476er wanted to work on that show, so they let me do it.
Not a single person in all of Chicago.
I guess not. I mean,
and look where you are now. You're here talking on a panel.
But yeah, my first like in the union job was electric. And that's just because of my buddy Marty. He met me. We were doing the Sirens pilot had reshoots, and him and I both gripped on that. So we worked together for like 2 days, 3 days. And then I left town to go work on an indie. And then he called me while I was there and saying, "Hey, I'm getting hired on as set electric on the show. The gaffer wants me to hire it out. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure, why not? It's 6 months of work." And then, unfortunately, at that point, then you get typecasted. So I was typecasted as electric for a little bit.
Yeah.
Then I had to work really hard to flip back over towards grip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, matter of circumstance, you needed to pay the bills, it's good work, good meeting people.
It was an opportunity. Honestly, I was so new to the union that it's like, why not just go for it and try it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. And then, you worked a lot on Chicago PD. That's where I know you from.
Right.
Is NBC Chicago PD.
Yeah, I started on three.
On rigging, on PD.
All right. No, I started, I guess technically at the end of season 2, I started day playing. I was offered a full-time slot season 3. No, all shooting. I've done 1 day of rigging on Chicago PD. It was a Saturday.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. And you spent a lot of time on that crew with those guys on Chicago PD. How do you feel like, those years really molded you as a grip and as well as a key grip in terms of working, so for those of you who don't know, all those NBC shows, they're at least usually 20 episodes, if not more sometimes.
Yeah, they're all pretty much 22 to 24.
So 24 episodes at 8 days an episode, that's a lot of work.
It's 9.5, 10 months of work.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a lot of the time spent on the set. That's a lot of time being faced with challenges. And you did it for 5 years almost, right?
Yeah. So I'm super thankful for it because Jason Storant, who's the key grip on that show, is just such an amazing person. And him and I are so similar in like personality. We're all about having fun on set and getting stuff done. So I like to mold myself I like to move forward with that in mind, and he's very much like-minded. So I've learned a ton from him.
Yeah.
And it's after season 3, season 4 and 5, I was keying all their second units. So it kind of was a nice atmosphere for me to cut my teeth keying in Chicago as a union key. It's nice to be able to like have a family atmosphere where I was on that crew already for a full year. I knew everyone, so that if I made a mistake as a boss on the second unit, it's a lot more forgivable than when you are the guy. You know what I mean? Like it allowed me to kind of transition, and it's been great because as I'm still transitioning into keying now, I'm like an up and coming one here in Chicago. It's when I'm not keying, I'm allowed to go back and work with him.
Yeah.
Which is great, because it's all about just days and staying busy.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Tasha, I want to loop you in on this conversation too. So you and I went to school together, right? That's how we know each other. And when you started working professionally, when you left school and when you decided to pursue a career in set work, you started on a rigging crew. And for those of us who are listening who are unaware, can you sort of describe the differences between a rigging crew and a shooting crew?
Oh yeah. Yeah, rigging is totally awesome. When you're on a set electric crew, on a shooting crew, you'll get to a location and basically it'll already be rigged out. There will already be a large generator there. There will already be cable laid down, boxes for you to plug into, all that stuff's done so that when you get to set, you look around, you figure out where the power's at, you unload your truck and you're ready to work.
And this is not even just stage. This is anywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere.
Yeah, this is anywhere. You're going to shoot at a bar, or a hotel or whatever, anywhere.
Or even in like a big field.
Yeah, even in a big field, you'll probably have a rig down. So that's what the riggers do. They come in before the shooting crew. They lay everything out and they come in after and pick it all up. Riggers also build the stages. So when you go into CineSpace and you see like these huge stages and there's truss and lights rigged everywhere and there's cable everywhere, that's the crew. That's many, many weeks of prep. They also maintain the stages. So like you go and you shoot in stage 5 and you make a mess and then you got to get out of there. You don't have time to, wrap every single stinger and reset every single box. Riggers come in and clean it up. They also will pick up additional gear. So like, let's say you're going to like a really big stadium and you need extra big lights, you need 20 extra T12s. The riggers are going to go to the rental house. They're going to pick all that stuff up. They're going to bring it to the location and they're going to have it all set up for you. So basically just streamlines the job of the shooting crew.
Yeah. And how do you feel as though your experience on the rigging crew has informed yourself as a shooting electrician as well as a gaffer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody that wants to be a shooting electric or a gaffer should do at least a couple of days of rigging, so that you know what equipment you're working with, so you know what to ask for when you're the gaffer and you need to build a rig and decide what lights you need to use and how much power you're going to need for those lights. I mean, it's such an enormous part of the electric department and what we do, that I think it's absolutely essential to do at least a couple of days to know what's going into it and know the kind of work that's going into it. I know I knew very about rigging when I first joined the rigging crew, and that I mean, similar to Dave, I fell into it. I got a couple permit days in The Exorcist as a shooting electrician. And I was on set and I happened to overhear the rigging gaffer, Danny Gianeschi, saying, "Oh, we need guys. I was like, "Oh, really? I need work." He's like, "Great, you're hired. You're free Friday." And I started working with them, and they really needed manpower, and they were happy with my work ethic. And so I joined that crew for about 2 months. And rigging is really hard work. I mean, it's cable is heavy. But I like it a lot. I think it's really like interesting and dynamic work. It has a very different pace from being on set, where you're kind of constantly waiting and watching and paying attention, and your instincts are working. Rigging is a little more, you're going to go to a location, you're going to spend a couple hours doing a rig, you're maybe going to take a break for lunch and maybe go wrap up a set and then do some housekeeping at the stage, and then that's it. So it's a much more regular schedule. You usually start at 5 a.m. 5 or 6 a.m. And you're out of there by 4 or 5 p.m. So it's a little easier to build a normal day routine.
So you'd say it's a safe assumption to say you're happy that you started on a rigging crew before you transitioned to a shooting crew?
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't know if it's necessarily like, I'm not going to say like you should definitely do rigging before you do shooting. I think that any combination of the two is great. Maybe you spend some time in a shooting crew and then you jump over to rigging, for a couple of days here and there. But really, I mean, really and truly, it informs your work on set so much to know the rigging side of things. It makes you a much, much stronger set electric. It's a totally essential set of skills.
Yeah,
I would say.
And Dave, you being a key grip, I'm sure you rely on your riggers a lot with any of the, any big rags you got to put up beforehand, or really anything, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, it's their job to support our department. So the rigging grips support me, the rigging electricians support Tasha. It's, it's one big conversation of, this is what we need to do. How can we get it done? And they preset this up, and then it's, how can I help you with that? Do you need anything from me? Or likewise, I need this done. Can you do this for me? And it's great. Like on the Candyman reshoots, we had to do a big green screen, and they spent 3-4 days building them, and it was a 20-foot by 100-foot green screen, which took a lot of work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I need this. Can you get this done? And it's just a collaboration. I don't know.
Totally. Yeah. What's up, Tasha? You want to say something?
I was going to say my favorite rigging job I ever did was the Empire season 3 finale. They were shooting at the Horseshoe Casino, just by the border of Indiana. And it was like a 3-day rig with like 16 guys. It was huge, and we had gators and tons of equipment running around. And so we put like 12 T12s up on the roofs of the parking garages, and then we went back the next day and it snowed 3 feet. So we had to spend like 4 hours like digging these like T12s on Roadrunners out of the snow. There's like this great picture of me like thigh deep in snow next to a light that's also, like 4 feet deep in snow.
And they gave you all hand shovels, right? No.
Oh yeah. No, it was. I mean, it was. That's probably my favorite rig ever.
That's awesome. I want to loop in the camera side of things. Ella, I want to start with you. You have a really interesting story with how you got started. You started on the Empire crew. Oh my God.
Sorry, guys. I got a phone call, apparently.
Take it,
so you
Dave.
start. Yeah, it's maybe it's work.
Yeah.
I like it.
So you started on the Empire crew as a camera PA while you were still in school.
Yeah, I actually had one other camera PA job before Empire. So like
Yeah,
the
that's
summer
right.
before my senior year, it was a union show, but it was a very small union show and compared to something like Empire, came into town. It's called Hot Date. And I was working at the camera vault at the time. And one of the guys running
I can feel
CineSpace.
all the people watching, all the camera volunteers just perked up. For those of you who have been out of school for a while, the Camera Vault is the relatively new camera equipment checkout center, now located at CineSpace.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so the unit production manager of Hot Date knew John Corba, and said, hey, we're looking for somebody who can like be a camera assistant and help with this like 1 day camera test. And so John asked my boss, Eric Liberaki, and Eric said, well, Ella's great. Why don't you guys take her? And they were looking specifically for somebody female because they wanted me to be able to like help on the camera side of things, but also step in front of the camera to be like a stand-in so they could like test lights on my face. And so I did that for a day and that was really fun. It was a great experience. And then from there, they were like, hey, we would love to have a camera PA for the rest of the season. We can't pay you, but do you want to come do this? And I was like, absolutely. So that's basically what my summer was flipping between doing overnights with Hot Date and then going in and working at the camera vault during the day to make that money. And then, one of the camera assistants on Hot Date was friends with the key first on Empire and knew they were looking for somebody. So she gave me her name, and then Empire had me out for a day to sort of like interview me, but really they were all just meeting me and making sure I was like a normal person sort of. So then
as
I was
normal as you can be working on a movie set.
Absolutely.
Ella, I remember your interview day.
Yeah, I was so excited that like there was somebody I knew on set, and so it was Tasha, and she was so excited to see me. And they were like, "Well, if Tasha likes Ella, then we have to have her." Yeah, so I did Empire my whole senior year. I would work 2 days on Empire and then have 2 days of classes and go do shoots on the weekends.
So that's a extremely packed schedule. That's pretty, that's wild. I remember when that was going on and you would work till 4 a.m. and then go to class at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or something.
Yeah. Some days it really was not fun, but it was like absolutely worth it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you transition out of camera PAing then?
Well, so my first non-camera PAing day was when I was still on Empire. They did what's called like permitting me. So they basically like let me do a union position for a day because we were out in the middle of nowhere and like somebody got sick or didn't show up or something and they like needed a utility for that day. And so it was like an hour or something drive out of the city. It was like 6 a.m, so nobody was awake and answering their phone. So they just bumped me up for the day. So I had like a couple of like official utility days under my belt before I graduated school and then joined the union. But basically when I joined, I just like called around and said, hey, I'm joining, please hire me. And people did.
Awesome. And what did you join as when you joined the union?
A utility.
You joined as a digital utility. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you worked in that job for a couple of years, right?
No, just for a year. So I graduated from DePaul in 2018, in the spring of 2018, and joined pretty much right after that. And then worked as a utility, sometimes as a loader for that whole year. And then in the summer of 2019, I got called for my first second AC gig, and I've pretty much been doing that ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. And so Brian, you comparing that story from Ella to yourself, you guys basically have opposite stories. You and I talked, you more or less joined the union right away as a second assistant.
Well, actually not right away.
Okay.
So I graduated DePaul in 2007. So I was the second class out of digital cinema ever.
Hell yeah.
And at the time we had, it was pretty bare bones in terms of gear. And so graduated.
Not at all like what it is now.
What's that?
On the 9th floor, and that was it.
not at all like what it is now.
Like a small Arri light kit and like XL2s and a DVX 100, and that was basically it. So it was a lot of just run and gun, like docu-style stuff. But yeah, graduated in 07, and then 08 happened, the crash. And so I actually moved in with my parents. I lived in my parents' basement for like a year and a half, just trying to like make ends meet and figure out what to do. And luckily I found a job at the CME group, which is at the Board of Trade, doing like all of their camera stuff for the trade floor, like any live broadcast,
Oh yeah,
like CNBC or CNN or whatever, MSNBC, all that stuff.
So you're right at home here.
Yeah, exactly. This is my roots right here. But yeah, no. So I did that for 2 or 3 years. Then there was like a trader or somebody who knew a producer in the reality TV world, and I got into that. I did a couple travel shows, one in Hawaii, one in Greenland, in Arizona, and did that for a couple of years. And then in 2013, finally joined 600. A couple other colleagues of mine from DePaul were in 600 at the time. They had joined a year before me, and so they were more or less my references into the union.
Yeah.
Joined in 2013, and for about 3 years I was sort of just day playing on the shows, doing a bunch of commercials and whatnot, and got my first like full-time gig on Exorcists, which was I don't know, 2016. Yeah, right. So yeah, and I joined as a second AC, like you said. So I skipped over utility, although in hindsight I kind of feel like I should have joined as a utility, just because getting on a set as a second AC and not really knowing the ropes of everything is very intimidating.
Yeah.
And
I love you got the story from
huge learning curve with everything, to the point where like, you know, I didn't even know like what actors' marks were. So like, you know, my camera operator would be like, "Oh, go stand on that mark out there," or whatever, so we can get focused or whatever. And I had no idea what he was talking about. You know, like that. You know that I was that green. So it took a good year and a half to like really figure it all out.
Yeah.
And a lot of just like trial and error. You know, low budget commercials at first. And yeah, it was intimidating at first, but yeah.
And now you're here. Now you're here as an operator.
I joined as an operator last year, about this time last year. Lisa Wiegand, DP Chicago Fire. I had worked with her for a couple of years on Chicago Fire as a second, and she would actually bump me up as C camera operator. I showed interest in wanting to operate. That's always what I've been wanting to do. And she gave me the opportunity. Actually, a couple other DPs had before, but she like really, you know, took me under her wing. And there was one day she's like, "What about coming out to LA for season 2 of Mayans?" And at that time I was still a second AC, and I'm like, "So what do you mean, like as a second?" She's like, "No, as an operator, as our B camera operator." And at the time I had only maybe a year of Steadicam experience under my belt too. And in terms of experience, I mean like just playing around on my own and like very small projects here and there, nothing full time or anything like that. But she kind of went on a limb and brought me out, and the rest is history. And yeah, I've been pretty busy this whole year, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I really like, you know, I really like hearing where everybody started. I'm sure everybody else listening does too, because it really highlights an important note that I think we all feel, which is there is no one way, you know, there is no way that you get started.
Right.
And everyone comes from a different path, and everybody finds their own success in different ways. And everybody's careers advance at different paces. And, you know, so we all know Tori Lennart, who's another DePaul graduate, who's a good friend of mine. And she and I went to school together well. And she always would say, don't bother comparing yourself to the people around you. You want to focus on you.
Right.
You want to focus on what you're doing and being the best, whatever that you are. As corny as it sounds, but it's true. It really is true.
Mm-hmm.
If you start comparing yourself to everybody else, you're just going to get down on yourself, and it's just going to be hard. And
everyone just cuts their own path,
Totally. So I want to jump into some of these questions. So I think I'm sure the burning question for everybody is, how do I get into the union? Which, if we really think about it, is really a two-part question. The part one of the question is, how do I actually put my name on the piece of paper? How do I actually physically get my card? But the other part is probably the more important part is, how do I meet the people? How do I get the experience? What doors should I be looking for to knock on? And I want to hear from any of you guys, what you think about just trying to get started as a day player and trying to, make that first bridge of a connection. Anybody.
I think a big thing is telling everybody you can, anybody that will listen, your aspirations. So if you're like dying to get on set as a set electric, like tell everybody, tell all your friends at DePaul, tell Joe Lyons, tell your teachers, tell any of your friends, who have done days here and there on this, on that. Because people remember that. I know I remember that. And then when it gets really busy in town and we need permits, you think, such and such, I know they're really interested in getting days. So, just anybody that'll listen, I want to do this. This is my goal. This is my dream here. Especially, we have a community. DePaul has an amazing community. The DePaul Society of Cinematographers, that I don't think that existed when I was there. And that's, an amazing resource. So I think that's big.
And also, sorry, after you.
Well, going off of that, people talk to each other, when especially when town gets really busy, if I have exhausted my list of contacts, I'll reach out to other people that I know and say, hey, we're looking for, a digital utility. Who do you know that you'd recommend? They don't even necessarily have to be in the union. Who could we permit? Who do you think could handle this day?
Well, I feel like as DePaul students, you guys have such an upper hand because you do have your stages that are literally on CineSpace.
Right next door. Yeah.
So you were literally face to face with all sorts of union people all the time by sheer fact that you're in the same building. With that being said, I do think it's important, if someone's a grip, to maybe introduce yourself and start a conversation, or for example, this group, this conversation actually is a great thing, because ultimately at the end of this, my email, I'm sure will get sent out to you guys. And if anyone needs help with a rig or to figure out how to do a camera move or anything like that, you can always email me. And I'm that's kind of how I did it. You get to know someone in the union, and then you ask them questions, you befriend them, and eventually that's one way of getting on set, right? At least that's how it was for me. But you have to put yourself out there, and you have to advertise yourself, like Tasha said, and just talk about it. This is what I'm interested in, and advocate yourself.
Right.
I think everybody really, anybody responds really strongly to people being passionate, and
yes,
people love when so many people go to film school to be directors or to be producers or to be writers, but I can't speak for anybody else, but I certainly speak for myself. I love it when people are passionate about, as goofy as it sounds, being a camera assistant. I love being a camera assistant, and I love sharing that excitement and sharing that passion with other people, with young people, and people who are also interested in the craft.
I would also say, for those in camera or who are looking to get into camera department, go hang out at a rental house. Whether it's Keslow, whether it's not Schumacher, Camvision or Keslow,
Offenbach.
Yeah, just go hang out, just go talk to any of the techs or just any of the ACs that are there prepping. Don't, be overbearing or anything, but ask questions, see what they're willing to let you do. Maybe it's as simple as help them load a truck. load the carts onto a truck, or just make up
Label stuff.
Yeah, just stupid little stuff, and that goes a long way. Just get their information, and who knows? You could be on the next show.
Absolutely.
If I could piggyback on that, because it's the same for us with when I was at DePaul, I used to rent gear from SNA quite a bit, which is a lighting house here in Chicago. And it's the same idea. You want to get to know those people too, because they're people you're going to be working with for your entire career of being here in Chicago.
Right.
And they also have access to all these people. And it just it's just a good idea it gets your name out there even further.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and plus SNA does a 50% discount. At least they did when I was in school. So as long as you can get insurance through DePaul, which you could when I was at school, but we're saying just do it.
Bouncing off of that, yeah, I was before I was in the union, I was doing some indie commercials, and I rented gear from Dave. I can't think of his last name, with Catalyst Lighting. Dave Poella, who is like a big commercial guy. And just from that instance, he remembered who I was. And then 1 week later, he called me for a commercial, and that was my first union commercial ever. So, I mean, just exactly like Dave said.
It's all about building relationships.
You're an initiative too. I mean, he's like, oh, you're just out of school and you're renting gear for commercial. Like, hell yeah. That's, cool passion, cool initiative.
People like the initiative. People like the passion.
Right. Yeah. And it is one big snowball effect too. I mean, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And before you know it, like 10 years later, you've just been like building this relationship with all these people. And it's like, how did I get to this point? Well, it's just like meeting people after people after people, it's just like one thing after another.
And especially because Chicago's so small, like we can meet everybody because it's a small enough community.
Yeah. Brian, I want to get your 2 cents on this. So you working on the A camera on Chicago Fire for all the years that you did. Right. I would assume that you were hiring all the day players on that show.
Yes.
Or your 3 camera days, your second unit days, things like that. So from your perspective, what are you guys looking for when you guys are looking for day players, when you guys are trying new people out? What qualities really stand out to you in terms of getting the thumbs up?
I mean, we know who's green already. Like we know who has experience and who doesn't. If we come across a name that we haven't heard, if depending on how busy it is, we'll give them a try. If we've heard a couple things about them, if they're decent or whatnot. Sometimes it's just like, just get somebody in here,
Yeah.
And at that point, honestly, your knowledge of everything doesn't really matter. I mean, you get that base knowledge through film school, but in a sense, all of that sort of goes out the window when you're on set and in the thick of it. You know what I mean? And it's just at that point for us to when we're watching what, how you're handling the day, it's just basically, your eagerness to want to learn, to be receptive, to ask questions, to show initiative, and frankly, the learning of it all and the skill set kind of comes on the job as you go, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of relearning,
right?
That needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, things that you guys might learn on an indie set are completely different than the way that we do it on a union set or a big studio show. So yeah, we have. Sorry, go ahead.
And likewise, what you learn in class could be entirely different than how
you
do on a union show.
Right.
Yeah, and that may not even be. Even, for example, that may not be even be in, well, what you're doing is wrong and this is the right way. It may even be just a matter of preference too.
Right. Yeah. And you're going to come across that a lot with different ACs, the wide range of how things are done between other firsts, some are very hands-on, some, want to do everything from putting the monitor on to changing a lens or whatever. And you're just sort of there for support. Others are nowhere to be found, and all they do is pull focus, and no way is a wrong, there's no wrong way of doing it. And so you just sort of have to adapt to each individual, I guess.
But to add on to kind of what you were saying about how you relearn the craft on the job, I think what's most important, which you kind of started getting at, Brian, was to get invited back more. It's not important that you know everything. It's more important that you are able and willing and show that you're learning, you're asking the questions. And honestly, for me, it's that you're a fun person. You're fun to be around.
True.
You're talking about spending anywhere from 10 to 16 hours a day with these people. So if you're not fun to hang out with, you could be the best AC, or for me, the best grip in town, and I won't hire you anymore because frankly, I don't want to spend time with you. Right. So you have to, it's more important to be a fun, honest person than it is to be super good at first, because you're going to learn the trade as you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of check your egos at the door, you know?
It's definitely, and then, go ahead, Tasha.
There's definitely an element of figuring out like where you can fit in any given situation, and that can be like minute by minute. You know, like at one time there's like a huge lighting setup going on, and you're like over here, and you're running power over there, and you're bringing somebody apart over here, and then it's chill for like 4 hours, and then maybe the best thing you can do is like go through the carts and make sure that you know every single piece of equipment, or you know, check out the expendables on the set card, or you know, figure out how you can be useful at any given time.
Or to tell a couple good jokes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
So when I first started joining the union, when I started doing union set work, that was something that I really had trouble with. Is I was so passionate about the job. I wanted to do well. I wanted to do a good job so badly that I just basically froze up. You know, wouldn't say a word. Wouldn't talk, you know, I was like a zombie, you know, and I did the job, you know, really quickly and efficiently, but I was completely forgetful because I didn't say anything. Nobody remembered who I was. And believe it or not, the person who really kind of pointed the mirror at me was Jason Bonner.
He has a tendency to do that.
Yeah. And he was total. And I have a very clear memory of being on the camera truck at the end of the day on Chicago Med, and him kind of sort of pulling me aside and being like, you know, look, man, like you got to have a personality. You know, I know you have one, but you're not letting it out. You know, you're not letting anybody see you. Dave, I know, you know.
I love that. I can see him saying it.
Right? So
yeah, I can hear it. You know, I was there from you telling it like that. I was there. I know exactly what it was like.
And so that was something that I really took to heart, where, like you said, Dave, you know, you can be the best craftsperson in the world, but if you are, you know, it's not even that you're mean or that you're grumpy, but if you are, you know, totally quiet and you don't say a word, and, you know, hopefully somebody sort of brings you into the flock and try and strikes up a conversation with you. But the big part of it is, you know, you getting out of your shell and talking to people and meeting people. And, you know, that was the thing that I struggled with the most when I first started. It wasn't the job, it was the people.
We're just
I feel like for people starting out, like everybody says, you know, ask us questions, you know, we want to teach you things. And one, I think it's difficult for people to know when a good time to ask questions is, because set can be so overwhelming and so busy. But when there is a lull, like, you know, if you're waiting for the sun to go down, or if, you know, you're waiting on an actor, or if you're sitting in a van going from one location to another, like that's a great time. Like keep those questions in a memory bank so that you can reference, hey, I saw you do this earlier. Why did you do this? Or was it because of this reason? And so I think that is a really important thing, but also like we all do this because we love it. And like, I don't think I have met a single person on set that does not love talking about what they do. So like, as long as I ask some question to get them started, like I will learn so much just from hearing other people tell me about their job.
Yeah, they want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like awesome for us. This is like,
yes.
Oh, you want to know about electric? Like, great. How much time do you have?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Hey, Dave, I want to get the other half of this idea from you. So Brian kind of covered, you know, the day player aspect of it, I want to hear from you, being a key grip, picking a core crew.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? Because like you've built these relationships over the course, of the different shows or different whatever you've worked on. And it's honestly, I built it, and it's the same idea. It's like, are you down to have fun and get shit done? And if you meet those criteria, I'm open to you being on my crew. And I've been fortunate that I've found a group of people that are all like-minded, and we just have such a fun time on set. But ultimately, it was like, for season 2 of The Shy, I hired my buddy Max, and he's like my right-hand man. He just is my support. If I need to walk away from set, he steps in. And him and I kind of talked about it, like, well, who do we think would fit into our mix? And he brought his buddy Jake, and like it just all conversation, you know what I mean? Like, because ultimately you have to be aware of what people you're putting together. I can't just make a list. Like, I think all these people were good, because they are all good, but you have to be aware of the group. You know what I mean? Like, everyone has to.
It's a puzzle. You got to fit the puzzle together.
Totally.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question, I guess.
I think it does. I think the real answer is it's all about relationships. It's all about meeting people and doing good work, but also having a good attitude and being a good fit.
Well, and likewise, so if for the next show, if not everyone is available, I would talk with the guys that are and be like, who do you guys think we should hire? Because ultimately, if they think they're, a good choice, then they are a good choice. You know what I mean? So it's all one big conversation.
Yeah. In fact, now that you mention it, I was reminded of, so my first staff job was on Chicago PD as the digital utility. And I didn't know this at the time, but so the A camera second assistant, Jameson, who hired me, he confided with me, this was probably, years later. He said, when we had an opening on the job, at the time, the C camera second assistant and the loader, who I both knew, who were really good friends with me, they went to Jameson and they said, you got to get Alan. Alan's awesome. Alan's a great guy. You got to bring Alan in. And Jameson said, I know Alan's, and I already knew Jameson. I had already worked with him. And Jameson said, I know Alan, he's a great guy. I just don't think he can loosen up. I don't think, I don't think he can be someone who's fun to be around. And I got really lucky that those two guys, Kyle and Nick, they really went to bat for me. And they were like, no, trust us. Alan's a good fit. And now, like, all those guys, I mean, there's some of my closest friends. And, we've got a big group chat that I haven't been on the show in, close to a year at this point. And I still talk to them almost every day.
Well, and you still go back and visit.
Absolutely. All the time. Yeah. Whenever I can. Yeah.
I feel like the same thing kind of that Dave was touching on about building a core crew. The same thing could be said about joining a core crew. I know when I first started out, I was like, I'll do anything to be in a core crew. Like, I want to be full time. Like, I want the responsibility. And I have done like way more shows than I can list on one hand, which is awesome. But being core crew on especially a long show is, it's really, really challenging physically and mentally. It's a long period of time to kind of give yourself in the way that I think about it. You sacrifice most everything else and you give yourself to the job, because it is a very all-consuming business that we work in. So I think that it's important to, just because you're offered a spot on a core crew doesn't mean that you have to take it. Doesn't mean that it's the best fit, and I can think back on times where I'm like, maybe I didn't need to join that core crew, and I did, just because I felt like, I felt so flattered that somebody asked me, and I felt, like, of course, why not? But you don't always have to be in a core crew. Just because it's offered doesn't mean, and that's not to say that it's not great, because it is great. But I feel like there's this tendency to think, well, if I'm offered, then I have to accept. And that's not always the case. It's not every core crew is a good fit, or being in a core crew at all is not for everybody. I always say I've been trying to be a day player for 3 years and I haven't achieved it yet, because I always find myself on a core crew, which is awesome, and I'm so fortunate. grateful to have so much work.
Yeah. And speaking of that work, I want to switch gears just a little bit. One of the questions that I have in front of me is what are some of the major differences between indie work and union work? And I wanted to start with you, Tasha. So you just finished kind of abruptly the fourth season of Fargo, which was shot partially by Dana Gonzalez, ASC, who's a multiple Emmy award-winning cinematographer.
Not even.
And Pete Consul, right?
Yes.
Who shot House of Cards. So
both of them amazing cinematographers.
Yeah. And so can you speak a little bit about your experiences working on Fargo as an electrician and a gaffer? And if you're able to, how would you compare a show that probably, is at the cream of the crop in terms of budgeted television, and compare that with, your time in school and some indies you've done? Is that even possible? Can you even compare those?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. We're working on Fargo it was really one of the coolest shows I've ever worked on. Just in terms of the content, the story is amazing. I can't wait to watch it, to see it unfold, and for everybody else too. And the period piece is amazing, and there's a ton of money, so they just threw money at all the art, all the costumes, whatever. So it really was cool to be part of such a large operation, and something that you find yourself working on a lot of procedural TV, Chicago PD, Chicago Med. So it was cool to work on something where the content is very stimulating, very interesting. Working on that show as a gaffer, definitely, it raised my level of professionality for sure. I'm a much better gaffer in many ways than when I started. I was in situations where I was really genuinely pulling from everything I've ever learned about lighting, and really felt a different sense of responsibility and a different sense of achievement, just in being able to kind of handle the pressure and the challenges. Working with Dana Gonzalez was that guy's got a lot of Emmys on his shelf, and he's a tough guy. Anybody that meets him, he's down to business. He's very good. It was, it was really hard. It was really challenging at first, but by the end, it was not something that I would wake up half an hour before my alarm every hour, oh God, I got to work with Dana today. I got to, so it became a lot easier. In terms of working on something like that versus working on,
So let's hear. How about this? So you and I both did, coming up now on a year ago at this point, believe it or not, which is crazy to think about. We both participated in Wendy Roderweiss's Blue Light over the summer, which you were the gaffer for.
Almost a year ago. You're right. That's messed up.
So let's compare those two jobs. You're gaffing both those jobs. Mm-hmm. You're gaffing, a mostly student crew versus a professional, seasoned crew.
There's the obvious points, which is money, the amount of equipment, the amount of people there, all that is different. Fargo probably has a 200 to 300 person crew, and maybe that's off, maybe more 150. And then, Inferno, we had 20, 30 people. So definitely less people, less money. The thing is that the processes they're the same. You get to work, you're doing this scene for the day, you rehearse it, you block it, you light it, you shoot it, and then you move on to the next thing. So, in that sense, in terms of the headspace that I try to get into as a gaffer, it's not all that different. Obviously there's kind of a difference in stakes. But I think something I personally try to do is take those stakes and throw them out the window, because my performance as a gaffer should not vary between an indie project and a really, really high budget TV show. I want to maintain a standard of excellence, or whatever, in whatever job that I do. So in that sense, I don't know if I would say they're quite as different. Maybe I'm probably a little more relaxed on an indie set, if I'm being honest, and that's something I know I'm working towards, being my most relaxed self. Even in really, really high pressure situations, which I feel like I definitely got a good taste of those on Fargo. But managing stress, I think, is a skill like any other. I think it's the hardest part of our jobs. One of the hardest parts of our jobs is managing just the stress of every single minute of every single day. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Anybody else want to jump in? What do you guys think about, if you can, for those of us who have been out of school for a while, if you can harken back to your film school days and sort of compare then versus now, and what you think, what was the big shock to you guys when you got onto these big sets when you were first starting out? I mean, I remember one of my first days on a union set, certainly.
I mean, I can speak to this as somebody who's not that far out of school, but when I first started working on a union show, specifically a big one like Empire, the shock to me wasn't the gear, because we had pretty much all the same gear, if not similar or comparable gear at DePaul. And so all that technical knowledge and sort of like the book learning was the same. The big shock to me was just like how the set ran, because it runs so much more efficiently than a student set does. And so that, I think that was the big learning curve for me initially, was not the gear. It was just understanding how we make movies now. And sort of the social politics of the set and who to go to with what questions. Do I go talk to the art department? Do I go talk to props? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And forgive me, I'm playing a little catch up. Did this change to just student sets, or are we still talking about indie sets as well?
I guess either, both. So one of the other questions, is if you guys may or may not remember, what advice would you guys give for people who might be teeter-tottering between, do I want to work indie, do I want to work union? And so I'm trying to see what you guys think about comparing the types of work and the types of obligations, and the level of expectation that you need to hit on these kinds of jobs.
Well, from my experience, kind of student to indie to union is almost like a stepping stone, because I feel like in school there isn't grip and electric. It's purely speaking from grip electric point of view, not from camera or anything, but it's more of like a swing situation where the gaffer will say there really aren't key grips on student sets. From my experience, it's like the gaffer kind of lights and shapes light, and
you've upset all the student key grips.
Well, yeah.
One of them.
It's very blended. It's like, from my experience, it was all swing situations, which is what you would call that. It's, like you don't have grips, you don't have electricians, you have swings, and they do both. And then indies can run that way, or like the early indies I did were swing situations, and as they got a little bit bigger and bigger, and then I had more experience, I would refuse to do those jobs because it's, I wanted grip and I wanted electric. I wanted my own crew, because it's just more efficient to be separate. I feel like I'm ranting on it.
No, Brian, what do you think from a camera perspective?
I think maybe there's more at stake, I guess, on the bigger budget stuff. I mean, because every minute is, so many thousands of dollars or whatever, millions, maybe. I don't know. So,
every minute, millions of dollars.
Well, you know what I mean. But
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the pressure, there's a little bit more pressure to the situations. I think maybe, I haven't done a whole lot of indies at all, really. But from what I have done, I feel like there's a little bit more opportunity for collaboration throughout the camera department. I mean, you might see a second assistant come up to a DP and maybe suggest something more on an indie project, rather than like, on Fargo, for instance. Like you wouldn't necessarily go up to Dana and be like, "Hey, so I got this idea."
You would never.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
smack you.
Right. But yeah, I don't know.
It really is just it's ran differently.
Right.
Like, some indies can run like a union set, and that just depends on the department heads and the ADs and the producers. And
ADs.
others are like, I've been on plenty of indies where they don't even really block scenes properly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a whole gamut there. And then once you get into the union world, not to say that they can't be unorganized, but it really does
Oh, dude.
changes. It changes almost immediately.
Would you guys say that it's a safe, generally safe assumption to say that the worst union set is still better than the best indie set
Not
in terms of efficiency, at least?
No.
Oh,
No,
man.
all right.
Yeah.
Well, it depends
I
on how
mean-
you look. It depends on how you look at that, because being on a union set, at least on the worst indie set, they can be working you for hours and you're on a flat rate. On the worst union
Right.
job, they can be super unorganized, but you're still getting your straight time, your time and a half, and your double time. You're still getting your meal. You're protected.
Meal penalties.
You're being
Yeah.
compensated for being on a terrible show.
Right.
On an indie show, you're getting all that same stuff, but not being compensated most likely.
And there's no worry for turnaround or anything like that.
You're also still getting health insurance hours when you're on a terrible union show, when you're not, when you're on a non-union show. Like, that's a kind of a bigger conversation than just, like I think both suck as from like an emotional standpoint. I think being a union makes it suck less because you get all those extra benefits.
Right.
And speaking of those benefits, right? So the perks of joining the union, what are those perks? What do you guys see really? So first of all, maybe we should clarify for the audience. There was a lot of questions about the union employing you, right? And you working for the union. So does anybody want to try and maybe take a stab at sort of explaining the relationship between you, the worker, you, the union, and the show, the production?
Well, for starts, it depends on what state you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So we can very much talk about here, because as 476ers, we aren't a hiring hall. But if you
what does that mean? What does it mean to be a hiring hall?
A hiring hall is when, if I'm not working, I can call the union office and say I'm looking for work, and then they put you on a job. So like Local 2, which is another union, it's the stagehand union. They do all the concerts. They do all the, theaters in town. They're a hiring hall. So if I were in Local 2 and I wasn't working, I would say, hey, I'm looking for work. And then they'd give me a call back later that day, say, be here on this day at this time. You're doing this job. That's a hiring call. Whereas 476 is just, it's a union. And it opens up the door for you to work on things, but you are still ultimately responsible for finding work yourself.
And that's the same way for 600 in Illinois as well.
Right.
I guess you could put yourself on an available list, right?
Well, and we have that too, because ultimately the union will help, at least for 476. If I'm Sam King, we're working on season 4 of The Chi, and it's super busy. Everyone's working in town, and someone called in sick, and my best boys called and can't find anyone. The union will then come in and help you find someone, but that's them giving you a courtesy versus their job giving you work.
They're not obligated to keep their members working.
Well, and
not in a broad sense, at least.
Yeah, I would say that wording isn't really fair, but it's not their job to give you a job, but it's their interest to have you all working.
Right, because that's where they make their money.
Correct. It's just how the union works, So if I'm struggling to find someone, that's in their interest to help me find someone, because it makes the whole union look better. You know what I mean? So but it's not they don't have to, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to clarify that 600 does not have a permit list like 476 does. Because when I was in school, that was a big misconception that was going around, was like, oh yeah, like camera assistants can also call the permit list. We don't have that.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? I know why. I know why that's the case.
Yeah, well then say why.
You guys want to?
I'm the moderator. So the reason is because the nature of the work is so different. Where if you're doing a big job, like Tasha said, you're doing a big rigging job and you need to bring in 20 people, they need the means to be able to have 20 people on standby. Camera, it just doesn't happen. You don't bring in 20 extra people. it would be kind of crazy, you know, for you to have 4 cameras on a regular unit, much less 5, 6, 7. So the need for labor, it's just different. You know, you don't.
It is just different. You guys are so honed in, like each and every one of your jobs is, not to say that it isn't that way for us. I don't want to make it sound like it's dumbed down, but like it's a very honed in specific set of skills. Whereas for us, as long as you have a handful of people that really know what they're doing, you can have a bunch of worker bees and just, you kind of get the work done.
Yeah. There's only one A camera first assistant.
I mean, you guys, if you plug in the wrong thing, you can overamp something and completely fry a camera, right? Or something like
Sure, yeah, probably.
I don't know.
I feel like it's also worth mentioning. Oh, sorry, Dave.
After you.
Just if people don't know like what exactly the permit list is for 476 and how it's used.
Yeah, go for it.
I know it was like sort of ambiguous when I was starting out, but it's basically just a number you can call in at the union hall, and you say, "Hi, I'm such and such. I was referred here by such and such, and I would like my name to be in the permit list. I'm available these days. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but that's basically it. And it means that let's say I know, somebody who's not in the union, but we've got a really big day coming up. We need guys. And I'm like, oh, you should try it in our crew. I would say, call the union, get on the permit list, tell them that I referred you, and then we'll call you and we'll hire you, and it'll be okay that you're not in the union.
Yeah, essentially it's like a list of names because the priority, if you're in the union, you're looking to fill a job, you're supposed to hire someone that has a card first. Regardless, if I'm looking for a grip, Tasha's not working, she's an electrician, I have to hire her first as an electrician doing a grip job. Then if I know someone that's not in the union that is a grip, but not union. So the permit list is for like, if everyone is working, no one's available, you can hire off that list. And those are people that aren't in the union. And it's a good way to get your set legs and to start meeting people. But it's like you said, we called the union hall I did it every Monday. I think it starts at 8:30. And I would call at 8:30 in the morning and just do it. And you don't necessarily have to be super specific with dates unless you know there's a date you can't do it.
So you calling at 8:30 in the morning, there's a level of dedication there.
Yeah, I called for like 2 years and only got called maybe once. I got called.
That's crazy.
I got called to do Oprah Winfrey's last show.
I don't like that anymore, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, but that also goes back to kind of the times are different now. Like Tasha was talking about how you don't always have to pick a core crew, like to be core crew. That's also a luxury of the time. There's so much work in Chicago that you can pick and choose, but there will be a time, who knows, maybe after COVID-19, that there are less jobs. So then now you don't have the luxury of being able to say, I just want a day play.
That's true. Thank you for checking that.
Well, but it's important to point out because before, when I graduated college, Chicago was dead. There was like one show in town.
Right.
And then 2 years later, it started picking up. But even then, it wasn't that busy. And now it's like crazy busy. So like the idea of like LOU working every day on a set and going to class, like to me, that's crazy. And I feel fortunate because I was able to do it every once in a while.
Right.
I think it's amazing. It is an absolutely amazing opportunity, but it depends on the time.
Yeah. Well, and since I joined, I've mostly been a day player. There's been a handful of months where I've been like a core crew on a show, but I've still been pretty much working full time as a day player.
Right.
So, there'd be a week where I work all 5 days and I do 2 days on one show, 2 days on another, and one on a third. Like it's just, because it is just that busy.
Sometimes that's even more difficult than being on a course,
Absolutely. Show. Oh yeah, I've gotten totally screwed over on turnarounds where one show wraps really late and the other has an early call, and
I know it's you don't know where the gear is, you don't know any of the inside jokes.
Yeah.
So it's really tough being a day player.
I hated being a day player.
That's honestly my main reason why I didn't like day playing is because it's like I don't know where things are, and honestly I don't know everyone well enough that I can joke the same. So it's I'm a company man,
But on the other hand, I do I prefer being core, but there are pros to day playing. Like if I get sick of people after a couple of days, I don't have to see them again. Like it's
If you just want a day off,
Yeah.
It's like you don't feel as bad. You're just like, nah, I don't want to work Thursday.
I'm not
also,
that.
and that also brings it back into everyone's path is different.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, like ultimately you make your career what you want your career to be like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I want to pose a question to everybody. I'm pulling from the list. Union related. Is it true that once you join the union, your opportunities to explore other roles in the film industry become narrowed?
Well, we've got an awesome answer from 476 because we are a very unique union where you don't have to enter with a specific craft necessarily. So I've been doing electric for 4 years, but let's say I want to start doing art department. I can call all my art department friends, and if I can get a job, I'm good because that is under the 476 studio mechanics. So, we've got grip, electric, sound, props, art, hair and makeup, wardrobe. Well, those are a little, I think, a little choppier in terms of day work. But for 476, no, your options are opened. They're opened up to you. Unlike LA, where like you join 728, and that's the electric union, and that's what you do.
There's also a stigma that once you go union, you can't work non-union ever again. And that's where like people are hesitant. At least I have a buddy of mine that's a sound mixer, also graduated from DePaul, Rob Davis.
Yeah, Rob's a great guy.
If any of you know him,
Mm-hmm.
he's made a very successful career out of being a non-union sound mixer. But I don't want to put words in his mouth and say afraid, but he's hesitant to join the union because he's afraid he won't be able to work with those contacts anymore. And there's part of that is true, and there's part of that that's not true, because it's like you, as a union representative or member, you have to report any non-union work that you work on. Not to say that you can't work on it, but you have to report it, and they may investigate. And if those people can afford to pay union wages and benefits, then that show will get contacted and flipped, or it won't, and you can still just work on a non-union job. So
And for those who are unaware, Dave, what does it mean to flip a show?
To flip a show is to change it from non-union to union. They sign a union contract. That's flipping a show. Yeah. But so I guess it's a long-winded version of saying it doesn't cut you off from working non-union. It just changes how you go about it. Because I've still worked on movies since joining.
Yeah, at least for 600, it's like I don't have to report every single job I do. It's only if it's big enough to possibly qualify. But if I'm like going back to DePaul and helping students on a shoot, they don't care about that.
Totally. Yeah. It's the same for us. I would say ours is a little bit more heightened, because if it's like a small commercial that I know that's not going to flip, I'll still report it, because it's better for me to tell the union that I'm working on it than for them to get a call sheet and see my name on it and having not been told about it. So I don't know. Yeah. But I don't think it narrows. If anything, I think it opens your opportunities. If anything, staying in the indie world will limit you more, because you only will get to a certain budget and to a certain caliber of project. And once you get into the union world, that just, you can work on the same like level stuff, or you can go super big or even smaller. I think it opens the door.
Yeah. Right. Brian, did you have anything to add?
Well, I guess for, once, if you're joining, it's not like within the union you can jump around classifications, like, throughout the month or whatever. It's like you're a specific classification. But outside of union work, you still have any opportunity that you see fit, So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it really hinders much.
You guys certainly don't feel hindered.
No. I mean, for me, it definitely opened up the door for a lot more work, I think. I don't know if that's with just the times or what that is, but yeah, I mean, as a day player, you're working 4 to 5 days a week. As a core group, you're 70 hours a week, so I don't know.
I think there's also a very real life part of why you should join a union too. It's like, it is health insurance. It is getting represented. It is getting overtime. It is getting pension hours. There's life stuff that they don't actually really talk to you about in school. That's a very real thing that you have to deal with, and that being part of the union helps you do that.
Which, Dave, I'm really glad you brought up, because my next question from the list of questions was, what do you think is the biggest benefit that you've experienced from joining the union? I think you just hit it.
Well, I think that, I guess that question is, I don't know. It's part of it though, like there's a huge benefit. Like I haven't paid for health insurance because I work enough in my adult life. But if I weren't in a union, I'd be paying, whatever, $2,000 a quarter or whatever your policy is.
I don't even know how much it is.
I have no idea. So
yeah, for us with 600 beneficiaries are like, I don't know what it is, like $300 a year total. Like if you're a sole member and you don't have beneficiaries, it's free, right? There's nothing that you're putting into it.
It's all paid through your work.
My wife and kid, I think it's like $300 a year.
You guys also don't.
And it's good insurance too.
Yeah, it's like top of the line insurance. I mean, $5.
You have to work enough hours.
What's that?
You guys have to work a certain amount of hours to be on it. Otherwise, you get kicked off.
Correct.
Yes. Through the COVID thing, I think they're going to adjust that.
Sure.
They just did actually last night.
Right. So
maybe that's more than we get into for the student's sake, but insurance is a real thing. It's a life thing that you do get through the union. So
yeah.
Well, and to the number of hours you have to work, I will say that in my first, because they do it based on, I don't know, quarters or terms, whatever, set amount of time our union has that they time you for within that to see how much you've worked. My first term of that, I qualified for it. So it's not, it's an achievable
attainable.
bar. Yeah.
It's not impossible.
Yeah.
In terms of I think the question was, what was the largest benefit, right, to joining?
What do you believe is the biggest benefit you've experienced?
Honestly, for me, I wouldn't even go directly to insurance or anything like that. It's honestly just being able to work on the caliber projects that we've worked on, to work under the people that I've been able to work under being a union member, because that has pushed my career forward. And I think it's having access to, I don't know, I think it's important to always be challenged and to always be uneasy in your job. And I think being in the union has let me take jobs that have constantly pushed me to the next level. So if I think that's the biggest benefit. It's given me access to pushing my career forward and continues to let me move forward, I guess.
Simply put, and please, anybody who disagrees, speak up. But I think we can all agree that virtually all of the best craftspeople, all of the best directors of photography, at least in the narrative world, all of the best camera operators, all of the best gaffers and the key grips, actors, directors, producers, virtually all of them are in some kind of a union or guild or something, and working on these caliber jobs awards you the opportunity to learn from some of the best in the world.
Yes. Yeah. Even if that means, even as a set electric, I get to be right next to the director of photography and the camera operator discussing the shot. And for me, that's invaluable, how they're going to lay it out. And then the operator goes to their dolly grip and says, okay, this is how we're going to lay it out. And I get to be present part of that process with, these people who have years and years and years of incredible experience. Like the best operator in the world, Mitch Dubin.
Yeah. Tasha, can you speak more about working with Mitch, especially under the lens of you wanting to eventually shoot yourself? What was it? So for those who don't know, the A camera operator on a good portion of Fargo was a guy by the name of Mitch Dubin. And Mitch is a camera operator. He's an A camera operator. And most notably, he's been Steven Spielberg's camera operator since, I believe, going all the way back to Saving Private Ryan. He's done every Steven Spielberg movie since then. And you look his credits up there, unbelievable. He's considered one of the best in the world.
For a while. Just like when we first started, I didn't look at them because I'm like, okay, I know this dude has done like every movie I've ever heard of, but I don't need to see it in this one. Like, just
I can't help it. When I get a new job, I look everyone up. I'm so curious.
I gave it a little bit of time, but no, Mitch is he's actually a wonderful human being. He's extremely, extremely kind, extraordinarily professional. I think he was A operator for the first, I believe it was the first block of Fargo. So that was the first 2 episodes. And I think that was 28 days or so. And I think just him being there raised the level of the entire production's professionality. I mean, it was like everybody was on their best behavior, frankly, because everybody was. It's a big guy. I definitely did, do my best to. We were friends by midway through. I was friendly with him and definitely got in his ear as much as I could. But honestly, mostly I really, really, really like Mitch. He told me his favorite cocktails and, some stories about sex. I don't think I can say like, oh, he taught me like this and this, but he was a really lovely human to spend time around. And it was pretty amazing to watch him work. Not just like his physical work and the way that the shots look, but to see, the way that he interacted really with the director. Something that he said was that he's always thought camera operating should fall under the DGA. And I'd never heard anything like that before. And I thought it was really interesting that camera operating is almost a more directorial job than it is a cinematography job.
Sure.
And yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, you're helping tell the story with the lens. I definitely feel like it's more of like it's more theatrical than technical, I guess.
A lot of managing.
Right. Well, a lot of managing, but also, I mean, you're a character in the story as well. Your framing and your pacing and whatnot I would say it's a character. It's an actor in the scene.
But to go back to your interactions with Mitch, and you briefly talked about, like, he told you a bit about his personal life and whatever. Ultimately, that's networking. The more version of wording that is we're networking. You're befriending, you're becoming friends, and therefore networking. And then now that's one more person that you are legitimately friends with, but is also in your Rolodex. So if he's back in LA and he has a friend that's coming to Chicago to shoot a tier movie, and he's like, well, actually, I know this person that's up and coming in Chicago. You should call Tasha to gaff your, and then suddenly you're going to call for a job. Like all of that it's networking.
It is, yeah. I think operators from LA are like one of the greatest resources because very, very, it's very easy to talk to operators. Most operators, and I know I have a handful of just people I've been in a show a long time with, and they're like, yeah, if you ever make it out to LA, call me, and I got these people, these contacts. So, spread yourself around the country is.
And that goes back to being friendly, hardworking. It all circles back.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I guess that's kind of sort of how and why I was able to jump from second AC right to operator.
Which is not a normal jump for a lot of people.
Not a normal jump, but nowadays there is a lot more interaction between the second AC and an operator rather than the first AC and an operator. First AC is near their monitor, away from set most of the time, and the second is, at least good seconds are right there on set next to their operator, figuring out what's going on, constant communication with them. And so you're learning how to manage the set just by watching them, right next to you. It's like you're getting the firsthand view of everything.
And for those viewers who may not be so familiar with the nuances of what a camera operator actually does, obviously they are the person who's panning and tilting the camera and helping frame shots and things like that. But Brian, you as an operator, you and I have worked together on cameras together. Can you speak to, as Dave and Tasha talked about, the managerial side of being an operator, which I think is something that's often overlooked in film school?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects in every setup that you're worried about, whether it's a light in the shot, flag, set deck, obviously camera position, actors' marks, boom shadows, reflections.
You're dealing with all that stuff.
All that stuff goes into it. And that's all on you. That's not the DP. That's you to figure out, and that's you to like basically guard your frame. throughout the shot. And that's from the start of the shot all the way through to the end. So, how many setups do we do a day? Like sometimes 50, 60 setups.
Yeah, a ton.
Depends on the show, right?
What's that?
Depends on the show.
Yeah. And so through all of that, I mean, every single setup, you're doing that over and over and over again. It's a lot of work just doing that, let alone actually operating the camera. Sometimes operating the camera is second nature. You're relying on your dolly grip to get you from A to B, all these other things, and it just sort of falls into place if you're able to properly set up your frame.
Well,
it's a lot of
camera to camera politics, right? Like working with the operators to make sure you're all
for sure. That's another big thing. I mean, whether you're on A or B, the other operator is something you have to watch out for too. And a lot of politics go into that. I mean, as a B camera operator, you're more or less waiting on the A camera op to set up their frame and then see how you fit in, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it's better to just stand down because of that politics,
There's a story of an operator who went on Fargo as a day player on one of their second units. And Fargo was primarily a one camera show. Tasha, you might be able to confirm or deny that, but like it varied. But generally, I mean, they would follow that the A camera sets their shot first, and this day player operator came in not on the A camera and kept trying to fit a shot in, because in their mind they're used to always wanting to get more coverage for the director, but Fargo was not that kind of show, and that person didn't get asked back because they weren't playing the political game well. They were just, butting head first into this. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, as a director, you don't want to give them that option, in the cutting room.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just like, no, just stay back. I mean, there have been days as a B camera operator where you're literally sitting on the truck all day. I mean, not necessarily on the truck, but more or less just at Video Village all day long, and just sort of watching and seeing how things go. And if they need you, they need you,
Yeah.
Every job has politics.
Go ahead, Dave.
Every job has politics. You know what I mean?
Right.
Brian, there's a question here for you from the YouTube comments.
Number one.
Number one, yeah. Well, we said we were going to wait, but this pertains to directly what we're talking about right now. So I'll bring in this person. To what extent do you have a say over what's in front of the lens as an operator? For example, an opinion on moving a piece of set decoration or a light or things like that.
I think it depends on the show. It depends on the director, and it depends on the DP. And you kind of have to feel that out, whether you're day playing or on a show full time. I mean, I think on a show full time, you kind of you get the groove of it, into like week 2 or 3 or whatever. And you see kind of how hands-on the DP or director are versus, how much flexibility you have to kind of mold the shot,
What was your experience like on Mayans?
What's that?
What was your experience like on Mayans with Lisa?
Well, Lisa in general is more of a hands-off DP. She knows what the director needs, but then in terms of you finding coverage or finding a shot, she sort of lets you figure it out. Also, depending on the scene, so say if I'm, the A camera's got the wide shot, the master, and it's the group or whatever, and I have a shot of maybe a profile or something, whatever. It might work, it might not. It might be a good thing to ask about. It might be better for me to just, stand off, because there's sometimes where, if you shoot something, you have to shoot the reverse. You have to shoot the complementary angle of that. And that might add a setup in the day that they don't necessarily need. You know what I mean? It's not really, the benefit of it is not outweighing the time it's taking to do it.
So you're just as much a creative as you are a politician.
Right, exactly. And now, Alan, when we were on Next, I think we had a little bit more play. We could, DP would give us an idea of what he's looking for, or he might suggest something. But then in terms of like finding foreground elements, they really love that on that show.
Yeah.
Or,
like
just movement of the camera. I think we had a little bit more flexibility, which was fun. I love working on that show. Just because of that,
It's great.
There was really no wrong answer. It was sort of just like, see what you can give us, which was cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
I want to.
But to actually,
go ahead,
there are shows where a DP and a director will be like, "This is your shot. Don't move it," or "We need this shot and stick to it and leave it alone." And your input does not matter whatsoever. Like, and that can be throughout the whole show. Sometimes it's just that's how it is.
Yeah, it depends. Depends on who you're working for.
Right.
Which is usually the answer to a lot of questions. What's it like with this, or what's the way that your set runs when you do such and such? Depends on who you're working for.
And even as a focus puller too, I mean, some directors prefer more everything has to be sharp. Some prefer that sort of wishy-washy feel. It depends on the story, obviously, and you have to be flexible, really.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to. We've been talking for about 90 minutes, which is awesome, and I hope everyone's been enjoying the conversation. I want to open it up to questions in the YouTube chat, and while people maybe are kind of thinking about it or what maybe they want to say something, there were a number of questions that we had on the page or that were submitted online that I kind of called sort of clerical questions that are very, they really only have one answer. So I want to burn through a couple of these, and everybody, everybody else listening, feel free to jump in if you want to add something else to it or disagree or want to give your 2 cents on it. But so right off the bat, somebody asked, can international students join the union? I did look into this. The short answer is no. You have to be a U.S. resident to join the union. You have to prove a residency in the United States. That's something you have to give the union when you join. The long answer is I don't know the legalities of international students and where their affiliation with a certain host country lies. So short answer is no. Long answer is you got to talk to somebody who knows more than I do.
Well, I think ultimately it's no different than any other job. If you have a green card, then of course you can work. I mean, one of my grips is from Romania. He's not a citizen.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Dan Mihal is from Romania, and he's had a green card now for I don't know a decade or more. So he's in the union able to work, but it's no different than any other job. Ultimately,
yeah,
that's how I guess I see it. But
great, that's an even better answer than I would have been able to give. How has COVID-19 affected film productions? Short answer: there are no jobs. Every single job in the United States has been shut down, and we don't know when they're coming back.
That's right.
Yeah, we surprise shut down on Fargo. We had 3 weeks left. The day we left set, we did not know if we were going to come back the next day. It wasn't until 30 minutes after work they said, "Oh, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks."
And then you guys never came back, right?
No, we have not come back.
Are your trucks still packed?
They are. A lot of my belongings are on the truck.
It was so strange on the Candyman reshoots because every morning we do what's called a safety meeting, and the AD sits everyone in a group and they say, these are the safety concerns, yada, yada. And Mark, the first AD, who's done all sorts of huge movies, is like, so this is the strangest safety meeting I've ever had to do because it's how do you guarantee safety on a set that during a pandemic against a virus? You can't guarantee anyone's safety. So if you don't want to be here, you're more than welcome to leave whenever you want to leave. It's just weird. It's definitely strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky because I was on Chicago Med, so they had like bottles of hand sanitizer and medical gloves everywhere. So every time you walk on set, you just pump a little hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
How about, here we go. Here's a good one. Are there dues you have to pay to be in the union? Short answer, yes. Dave and Tasha, do you guys want to answer the 476 side?
Yeah. I feel like I don't know exactly how much dues are paid because I work enough that they're taken directly out of my paycheck.
Normally the dues, like there's a buy-in,
Mhm.
which for us, this also again is per state and per union. Everything is different, and rates can change year to year. But I got in 2013. I paid $1,600 to get in as a buy-in, and then I was paying $60 a quarter for dues. Is what it is for
Wow.
476. I mean, it's for us, it's actually quite affordable, but that also depends. And local 80 in LA is a significantly higher buy-in, and I'm sure their dues are more expensive. But I actually don't have those numbers.
Yeah. And then the local 600 side. So the money that you spend, there are kind of three tiers to it. So there's an initiation fee, which is a lump sum buy-in. There's quarterly dues, and then local 600 also gets, I believe it's 1% of your paycheck, and that's just taken right out of your paycheck. You don't even notice it. It just happens.
Ours is the same. I think it's 3%. Is that right, Tasha?
Something like that. Yeah, something close to that.
Yeah.
With that initiation for 600, that lump sum, there is payment plans too for that.
Yes, you don't have to pay it all up front. Usually they want you to pay 50% up front, and then you can do up to, I believe, 2 years to pay the other 50% at no interest, which is pretty nice.
I'm still paying off my initiation fee, and I also in that time re-rated to second AC, which is like I had to pay
another buy-in.
Yeah, it's a different buy-in, so I had to pay more. So they just like did their math on their end and gave me a new monthly payment that I have to pay. But yeah, it's very manageable with how much we make.
Which is the difference between 476 and 600 is that they're in 476, like Tasha was saying, we're a studio mechanic union, so you can be anything you want to be in the union. There's one buy-in, whereas you guys have different jobs that you buy into.
Yeah. And there was a lot of questions about like exactly how much money does it cost to join the union, and how much are the dues and all that stuff. Really, the answer is it depends. And if you guys are at home and you're thinking, I really want to join the union, you need to call the union. You need to talk to a business rep. You need to get those questions answered from them, because it largely depends on what you're joining as, when you're joining. There's lots of things that you need to answer before they actually give you a number. So, the short answer is call them and ask. If you're really serious about joining, then you should take the initiative to go talk to the union and talk to a business rep. Cool. I see a number of questions now on the YouTube chat. I'm going to hit a couple of these clear questions real quick. I'm going to bang them out, and then we can jump to these. Does the union have a set amount of time that requires you to work in union jobs? I think we answered that. No, you just join, you get in.
But also that's here.
That's here in Chicago, in Illinois, with 476 and local 600.
Right. And unions, it's obviously different.
Yeah. So it depends on your union. If you have questions, you should call them and ask. If you're serious about joining, you should start a dialogue with your union. You should talk to them. They will help you, but you got to talk to them. Don't email them. Pick up the phone and call them. Are you able to transfer between local 476 and local 600? No. They're two different unions. You can join both. You can leave the unions. You can leave local 600 and join local 476, but you can't transfer. They're two different entities. They exist on their own.
But you can transfer, like 476, you can transfer to local, I don't know, what is it, 471 is in Louisiana, but that's also a studio mechanic to studio mechanic. Or like I can try and transfer 476 to local 80, which is Grip in LA. that is technically possible.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's new for me.
I could transfer to Atlanta if I wanted to, but it also makes more sense just to try and get an additional card so you can work in Chicago and Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Transferring.
Here's a good one. Is there a possibility that students can join a workshop hosted by the union? For example, film loader or digital utility? I'll speak to the local 600 side of things. The short answer is no. And the reason is because those workshops are funded by the dues of union members. That's where the union gets their money. So the way that the union views it is they cannot offer workshops for people who are not paying for them. You could say, oh, well, could you just pay for it? That's above my purview. That's union leadership. I don't control that. And we certainly have talked about within the union about awarding opportunities to give people not in the union to go to those workshops. But the short answer is no, you can't go to them. 476, though, it's a little different, right?
Mm-hmm. I think, and Tasha, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can, but it depends on if there are slots available after union people have, like obviously union people get priority. Mm-hmm. And if the day before, 2 days before, there's still 2 slots open, I think you can. If you wanted to take a Condor certification class and you're in college and there's
I've done
available, I'm pretty sure you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done that class.
I took an LED soldering class from 476 when I was still in film school. So I know it's possible. And I remember like every now and then just getting emails like through the DePaul Cinema program that were like, there's a couple spots left for this workshop on this if you want to try it. So yes.
All right, great. Go ahead, Ella.
Sorry, jumping in. To the point for Local 600, you can't join union workshops, but you can ask, the DCC or the DSC or any other student groups to bring in people like us for in-person workshops. You'll probably get taught the same information, and you'll get to meet, in a school environment, you'll get to meet professionals face to face. So, yeah, just because you can't go to an official union workshop, that doesn't mean that you can't bring those people into you.
Yeah, absolutely. So jumping in on these YouTube comments. First one, in a general sense, how do you deal with difficult coworkers or bosses as a day player or a new hire, a new kid?
Just shut your mouth, keep your head down.
Question.
Oh gosh.
I think it's the same for any situation in life where you are managing people around you that, are maybe have different views or different personalities. I think it's a constant effort to do what you have to do to get yourself in a place where you can still do your job the best that you can possibly do it without letting that bother you. I think maybe it's a little different when it's coming from a boss. Managing difficult bosses, I don't know, man. That's a tough one.
That's a good question.
It's such a broad question because there's so many versions of that. Like I've dealt with, when I was on Betrayal, my boss on that was known to be a yeller, and he was a yeller, and he was a hardcore guy and old school. And the way we handled it is everyone in that crew was just so over the top, like ridiculously doing jokes all the time. And like by month 2 of that show, he couldn't handle it anymore. He just kind of stopped, and we just kind of like he would gap, but he wouldn't yell at us anymore because he knew he couldn't get through to us. But like one version of it. But then if a situation is really that bad and it's a hostile work environment, I mean, that ultimately like you don't have to work there. Or if it's really that bad, then there's HR. Like talk
to the union.
Yeah, talk to the union. There's like, talk with your coworkers about how you're feeling and how that's happening, and then kind of get their advice. Like there's so many ways that can go down. And I can honestly say, besides that show, which honestly wasn't bad, I've never had a bad boss.
I do feel like
lucky you.
Yeah.
Well, but I do feel like for the most part, the people that are like truly, really like terrible human beings to be around, like don't make their way up, or they like become better people. Like I think for the most part, the industry is moving in the direction of having like valuing respect and kindness. At least I hope.
And the version of what you're saying is likewise, they're not moving up, but they're also moving out.
Yeah.
bosses that are known to be aggressive it's very much a corporate structure now. And with HR, like there's plenty of bosses they're on NBC no hire lists now because they were so terrible to their crew. Like it's a thing. So I honestly think that is a thing of the past. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, but the question of how do you manage because we are spending as you said, Dave, like 10 to 16 hours a day with these people. Like if there's somebody that I really don't get along with, when I'm day playing, I am able to just say no to working on that show with that crew or with that specific person. I'm able to just say no, I'm not going to take that job. But if I'm full time on something, like I try to, just self-reflect and see how I can handle this. Does that mean minimizing my interaction with this person? Does that mean having a conversation with this person about our relationship or about how we're treating each other? And also like trying to just come to each new day with a clean slate. Like sometimes we just have bad days, and being able to sleep it off and then come to set the next day with a fresh start for everyone can also help a lot.
Totally.
I used to leave set and punch walls. Got like really, really, really hot and really mad. I'd be like, I gotta go take care of this, and not necessarily a recommendation, but for a period of time.
That's how Tasha deals with it.
That was at one point my my coping mechanism for anger.
You actually have those pictures on the walls because there's holes behind them.
I'll talk about it, man.
No, but I think Ellie, you just demonstrated it best. Ultimately it's up to you to handle it how you feel most comfortable. But there are a ton of different avenues to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think now that you mention it, Tasha, it's also helpful that I have a partner in the industry who I can go talk to and who understands the situation on set and also tends to know the same people. So I can vent and they'll understand. They'll speak the same language.
Yeah, you kind of develop a little clique within the industry of people that you can sort of confide in, right? Through the different shows, and like especially in Chicago, everybody pretty much knows everyone. So there is a lot of like you can't have that outlet of whether it's some sort of therapy through your peers. But yeah, I think one of the most difficult things about this job is managing personalities, really. I mean, once you get in a groove of like your day to day of the actual job, it's like that sort of goes on autopilot almost. Especially with the Dick Wolf World shows, it's just sort of what to expect every day. So it's just a matter of handling the people, really.
Yeah,
in your way and how you respond.
Absolutely. I always said the job is not hard because the job is hard. The job's hard because the people are hard.
And I mean, like Alice said, people have bad days. I mean, you work 14-hour days sometimes. I mean, there was a run on Sense 8 for a week long. They were here for a week. We worked 90 hours. And it's like that's your family, that's your friends, that's everything in that week, and it takes a toll on you for sure. But you can manage it. You can decide how you want to handle it. I mean, as a day player, if you need a day off or if you need some time, take it. You can definitely get burned out for sure. So you got to find your outlet.
Yeah, I think there's also generally like a larger conversation about like mental health to be had in terms of our industry. And I don't know if it's this is necessarily the place, but taking care of yourself is really, 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 really important when you work the way that we all do. It'll sneak up on you, truly.
I remember vividly there was a panel, not a panel, but we had a guest speaker as a LA gaffer of this when I was in college, and back when the stage was just below Jackson. So we were all by the green screen there. And I vividly remember how like dark his advice was. I remember thinking like, it's crazy, but there's essentially the same advice that I would give to you guys is every old timer will tell you, get out of the business now. Just don't even do it. And that's a joke, but it's something to be thought about because this is a lifestyle. So like there's so many different jobs in film, whether that be corporate or, like doing the board of trade stuff, Brian, like you did, like there are normal jobs in this industry, but if you want the show lifestyle in the movies, it's a lifestyle. So you have to consider the fact that relationships will be hard. Having a family will be even harder. Like you're working 80-hour weeks, you're working, like it's something that's not discussed about because it's like a glamour of film school is working on sets, but there's a very real life aspect of it that I think you need to heavily think about before entering the field, I guess. But I don't want to be a downer. I want to know when to take a break. It's true. It's raw and it's true. So I think, yeah. I mean, but it's super fun. I don't want to do anything else. And like, and Ella, like you said, like my partner's not in my industry, but she's in photography. So she essentially does the same thing I do, but has way better hours. So I don't know why I don't do that, but she gets it, so it's, I don't know, you figure it out obviously, but it is something to think about that it does change your life.
Yeah. You got to really love it.
Yeah.
Great. That was awesome. Let's bang a couple more of these out. How did you guys make the decision to join the union? What tipped the scale for you?
For me, I was definitely teetering when I was like, getting close to graduating. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go the union route or not. And I just tried to learn as much as I could about both sides. I talked to people like Dana Cupper, who is a professor at DePaul, who has experience in the union and also has a lot of experience outside of it. I talked to her. She gave me other people to talk to. And so, that was a really big question for me coming out of school was, do I want to join or not? And it also was partly because like I was working on a show and I was working just so much, both on the show and through school and everything else. I was getting really drained and I needed to take time for myself. So basically once I graduated, I farted around for a month. And then after a month, I was like, okay, like I feel good again. I feel bored. I'm going to join. And so that was basically the tipping point for me, was just boredom.
I know I teeter-tottered a bit because before I joined the union, I was in the indie world and I was mostly gaffing. So I was getting to be a department head and getting to be creative. And I knew that if I joined the union, I would, without a doubt, be a set electric. And so I don't know, I did consider that. And ultimately I knew that, I wanted to be learning at the highest level that I could possibly be, so that in the end, it wasn't really a question. And in the end, I was always going to join the union, but that was definitely the biggest thought in my mind was, well, this means, I won't get to be a gaffer, for the time being. But
here you are now.
Exactly. It worked out. If you put the work in and you put the time in, I think that, anything and everything is possible.
My situation is kind of similar to yours, Tasha, where I actually never applied to be in the union. I got a text from some friends saying, congratulations, you got in the union tonight. I was out of town working on a job when I got that text, and then I came back, swore in, and then left town again for another job, another indie job. But it was one of those things where I was keying, and like I had a career getting started with that, and I was already had maybe 10 movies under my belt by the time I got in. And you have to start, ultimately you limit what you can work on when you're not in the union. And it was better to start over because it's the same thing. I had to realize, well, I'm going to be at the bottom of the totem pole again, but it's better to be at the bottom of the totem pole when you're 23, 24, than 6 years later when suddenly you're 30. And because of that, I was able to, key my first studio show at 29, so it's like, it's worth it. Totally.
Yeah. For me, I think I always wanted to join the union, but when I graduated, there was just no work. 2008, before it was even before the Chicago fire, Dick Wolf world.
The CineSpace thing yet.
No, it really wasn't a thing. Yeah. And then, you know, it was just a financial thing for me, really. It was like, you know, at that point, I just didn't have the money to make the down payment. Um, and I was ignorant. I didn't, or naive to, I didn't realize that there was a whole payment plan, and like it is pretty attainable. I mean, um, but
But like you said, there was flat out less work then.
there was just, yeah, the competition was high. There was already people here that were working, and
So
so there was a thought in my mind of moving to LA after graduating and starting out there. Luckily, I didn't do that. I feel like we have a better opportunity here in Chicago. We're more of like bigger fish in a small pond sort of thing, and it's all essentially the same work, more or less. You know, the same caliber, I guess, throughout the country when it comes to the union work, whether it's a feature, whether it's television, whatever. So you know, I'm glad I stuck it out here, because now it's crazy, you know, and this definitely just, you know, it translates anywhere, you know.
Yeah, I do want to add on. My answer was a bit glib. Like my big quandary when I was trying to figure out whether I wanted to go union or non-union was like what we have talked about earlier. What somebody asked about before was like the collaboration of it. Like, will I feel like too much of a cog in a wheel, and not be able to collaborate with people? And I think like basically what Tasha just answered was like, you still get to do that outside of work. And so I can, you know, be working on big unit shows with like the best of the best, and be learning from these fantastic people who have been doing this for longer than I've been alive. And then I can go and take those skills and that knowledge and apply them to non-union jobs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You can't do it the other way around.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only way you get to do that.
And there is still a lot of collaboration within the union world too. I mean,
absolutely.
maybe not so much on the utility and second AC side for actually telling the story, but collaboration on how you manage a truck or build Video Village, all that stuff. Like there's a lot of collaboration in that. But then also when you get to that first AC position or operator, obviously there's a lot more collaboration.
Yeah. Brian, and it's funny you mentioned that. You know, that was something, if you remember that day on Next when we were doing that rain tower stuff.
Right.
You know, that was something that you and I talked about at pretty great lengths, where, you know, when you first start in the union, you know, for lack of a better word, this isn't exactly the way I want to phrase it, but it's the best thing I could come up with at the moment. When you're a utility, you know, when you're a camera PA, you're essentially not invited to be a part of the conversation on the set. You're not invited to be a part of the creative process.
Right.
And I remember when I first started in the union, when I first started being a utility, that was like, it was a big shock and it was a big downer to me, because everything up until that point, I had been pulling focus a lot as a non-union first assistant. And I had done all this work that I was really proud of. And then I started doing union work, and, you know, the thought of, well, you're not even going to get close to touching a camera, that was a real shock to me, and it was a big downer. But now that I've gone through the process, and now I have had the great fortune of being given the opportunity to be a focus puller on studio movies now, which is awesome. The thing that I have now learned, now that I reflect on that experience, is when you first start on these big movies and you don't have the experience, you don't know the language that people are speaking on the set. And there is an inherent language that you need to be able to learn to be able to integrate yourself into the set with everybody. And the best way to learn that is to not be a part of that conversation and to just listen to it. Right. Listen to how the camera operator talks to the director of photography, how the key grip, the gaffer, and the DP are all collaborating with each other. Listen to how an operator talks to a first assistant.
Right.
You know, how an operator will talk to a director, how a director talks to the cast. You know, these are all conversations that are all happening on, you know, low budget movies all the way up to big $150 million studio features. But if you get the opportunity to work on a big movie, when you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you don't really get to talk. All you get to do is listen. That doesn't mean you can't ever open your mouth. Of course, that's not true. But the creative, collaborative parts of the discussion are really held to the people at the top of the totem pole. And that was a big downer for me at first, but now that I've gone through the process, I realize you become a lot better because of it. You get to learn from all the people around you how to speak that language and how to be efficient and how to be smart about the conversations you have. And ultimately, I think you become a better storyteller. I really do.
And then when you're in that position of, making the decisions, then you know what to expect and know what kinds of conversations you're having. And I also feel like it's worth mentioning that, like on our side, specifically on like set electric for me, like when you first start out, like you absolutely aren't part of that creative process. Your job is very technical. It's very physical. But I feel like, depending on what gaffer I'm working for, especially my last boss, Mike Moyer, who I consider my mentor. We'd be in lighting setups and he'd say, I need some kind of a background splash, take a guy in a couple lights and give me something over there. And then that's when I get to exercise my creative, or, I need a key light. What do I have close by? Oh, I got this built. This is really close. And that's, and then I'm raising my level of, then I'm part of the conversation, even just a little bit.
Yeah. You have to build that trust.
Right.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important to be listening all the time, because those opportunities are there. It's just a matter of whether or not you're paying attention,
It's also important to start. I think it's important to start from the bottom and work your way up, because it's ultimately by doing that, you learn what every person does in your department and you learn to do it well. So when you're the boss, like let's say you guys start as a utility, when you're the DP and suddenly monitors go out and shit's hitting the fan, everyone's not going to the utility asking what's wrong. They're going to the DP.
Right.
What's going on. And at least then you know a little bit about what's going on. And
right.
You know what I mean? You're not.
Yeah. And you can take care of your crew and not throw them under the bus. Like I can give an educated answer instead of being like, I don't know, ask the utility.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can make decisions as an operator knowing how long it might take to move village or how long it might take to, move the arrays or whatever, and that's very helpful, and you're not throwing anybody under the bus.
Yeah.
And
the start over, the better.
What was that, Dave?
I think the sooner you start in the union and work your way up, the better. It's my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a union assistant that I haven't worked with myself, but I know through one degree of separation. And this person came from the indie world and was an indie first assistant and then transitioned into being a union first assistant.
Is this first?
Correct. Yes. And I don't know this person so well myself, but a number of my friends are really good friends with this person. And they've known them for a long time. They went to school together. And one of the things that assistant always said with regards to them transitioning from the indie world right to the union world and going right to a union first assistant, they have always said, I was never a utility. So when something is going wrong in the utility world, all I can say is just do better. I've never done the job, so I don't know what the job entails. And so I can't offer guidance. I can't offer critique. I don't understand where this person is not doing a good job or where conversely the situation is just a really hard situation. Mm-hmm. And they have been very honest about that and said, it's one of my biggest weaknesses, which I think is a really big weakness, especially for somebody who is a department head as a first assistant. Today, especially if you're on the A camera, you're the boss.
And it's so important to every day that, I don't know.
Yeah. Great. I want to hit a couple of other questions. So we kind of touched on it. I want to keep going with it. How come everyone here stayed in Chicago after graduating versus moving to Los Angeles and trying to do it out west, or say maybe in Atlanta or New York or any of those places?
Connections. I think it just boils down to this is where my connections were.
Yeah, same. at first.
Mm-hmm.
But now, Brian, now you know a lot of people in Los Angeles, so you have the opportunity to do both if you wanted to. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, if I could move out to LA and fit right in. I mean, there would be no growing pains or whatnot with that. And even, I guess, I would say from my experience, and maybe don't tell anybody from LA this, but I feel like we here in Chicago have a better work ethic.
Yeah.
Only because, mainly because there's less work, and this isn't technically Hollywood. You know what I mean? So these, and the tax incentive here in Chicago or in Illinois could just go away if at any point. So I don't know. I feel like there is a little bit more of like a sort of a fire under our ass to do good work, right? I mean,
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like there are a lot of older camera assistants that remember when there was no work. And so they will always, like, I feel like I've had so many people tell me, like, it can dry up any minute. Like, it's part of the culture here.
Well, even for you guys, I mean, since joining 600, there has always been work, right? I mean, there's always been at least 5 shows in town or whatever. I mean, I remember when I joined, it was Chicago Fire and PD was on their first season, and that was really it. So there was a lot of like, I mean, there were months that would go by where it was like a day here, a day there. You could work maybe 5 days out of the month. But now it's like, we just need a lot of people because there's so much work.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately when making that decision, like, ultimately we work in the film industry, you can make that work just about anywhere. So I think you need to ask yourself where you're going to be happiest. And for me,
right,
my life is here in Chicago. My family's here.
Same. Yeah.
My girlfriend and I live together here. Like, I remember when I graduated, there wasn't any work union-wise here, hardly any. I think Boss was the only thing really shooting. And I was fortunate enough to be out of town during that time working on indies. And I remember being so bummed. I got home one time, and I have a twin sister, and she goes, "David, we should get a beer and hang out and catch up sometime whenever you're back in town." And essentially, I was paying rent here, but I didn't live here. I was always away, and it gutted me. I hated it because it's like, my family's here. I should just try and make it work here. And I think everyone has to ask that for themselves. Like, would you be happier in LA? Would you be happy, live where you want to live, and make your work from there? But at the same time, now that I've set my roots in here, I'm not really interested in leaving because starting over again would be terrible. So it's like, I'm here.
You think so?
I think so. Like
professionally?
I'm not in the point in my career that if I moved to LA, I'd be keying. I'd start over again. It's not like I've been a key for 30 years. Now I can work anywhere because my resume is so thick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not.
I also think that it wouldn't take you that long to get to that.
Well, sure. I mean, ultimately, I think it's still the same thing. Like, go where you're happy. You know what I mean?
Right.
If Sandy had to move for work, I would go, and I'd make it work because that's what life is. It's just how it is.
One thing I could say is LA is oversaturated right now.
With jobs or with people?
With people.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of jobs, but there are a lot more people.
Gotcha.
For instance, on my ends, I was the B camera Steadicam operator, but my dolly grip and my second AC both also had Steadicam rigs. So it was like,
I'm sure they were pissed you were there.
What's that?
I'm sure they were pissed you were there.
Well, that's kind of where, yeah, it was tough, like the first couple months, because they were like, what the, like, why are they going to fly this guy out from Chicago? You got guys here. Plenty of people, obviously. But that was just a preference with Lisa Wiegand. But yeah, so there's just a lot more competition. And it got to a point sometimes where it was like, there was some tension between us because like I would make a decision as an operator And they also had the same mindset, and maybe they would have thought something differently, or maybe they would have done it differently than I did. And it's tough because they actually do have the experience. So that was weird.
Yeah.
A little awkward at times.
I thought I was going to move to LA as soon as I got out of school. I was like ready to rock and roll. And then there was so much work in Chicago that I would have been an idiot had I left. To be honest, I had a lot of conversations with Joe Lyons about that. And he was basically like, yeah, of course, do whatever you want to do. But, if you stay here, you will get your card and you will work. And so it seemed like an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. As I know, probably some of my boyfriend and I have been talking about moving to LA for maybe 2 years now. We were going to go last fall, and now it's a little bit hard to see anywhere past like tomorrow in terms of the future. So I really have no idea. And I don't know. He's lived in Chicago his whole life. We're both interested in trying something different. I want to shoot. I want to be a shooter eventually. And I don't think it's necessarily impossible here. But I think going somewhere else and sort of reinventing myself elsewhere, it's also an option. I also love the sun and I love the ocean. So those are contributing factors, but I don't know. It's kind of a constant battle in my head because I love Chicago, and more increasingly so, I love my community, my community through 476 and elsewhere. And I love gaffing, and I part of me wants to stay here until I do have my own show as a gaffer. So I think it's a decision that I'll always be bouncing in between personally.
Yeah, Tasha, I'm in the same boat where I also want to shoot. And I have this idea in my head that there's more of an indie scene out in LA where I can go shoot, whereas there's not that much opportunity for that here in Chicago. And another big thing for me is the weather. I am so sick of Chicago winters, and we work outside and we don't get to decide when we do and don't work outside. So there are days where it's I don't know, -10 and we're outside for 12 hours and we just have to deal with it, and it sucks. But yeah. So there's a lot of factors.
Great. Couple more here. So we hit that one. So this is a little bit related. This is more of a union policy question. But is it easy to work on union shoots in other cities outside of Illinois, for example, Atlanta or Detroit? So I'll answer at least from a local 600 policy standpoint. So the way that it works is local 600 is a national union, meaning they have offices all over the country and they represent people all over the country. With that being said, they don't want you to bounce from city to city to city to city to city, chasing work whenever you want. So the way that it works from a union standpoint in Local 600 is the city that you join in is called your guild residence, which means you can work as a local in that city. You can work anywhere you want in the United States, and I guess technically anywhere. But if you're working outside your guild residence, you are considered a distant hire, which comes at an additional cost to the production. They have to pay to travel you. They have to pay to feed you. They have to put you up in a hotel. So you could do it. The production essentially needs to value you enough to take you along with them. There's one caveat to that, which is you can name what is called a production city, which is different from your guild residence. And there are two production cities. There's Los Angeles and New York. You name one production city. And your production city, you can work as a local. So my production city is Los Angeles. So I can work as a local in Illinois and in Los Angeles. There's nothing stopping me from getting on a plane tomorrow, except maybe COVID. going to Los Angeles and working as a local in Los Angeles. There's no rules that prevent me from doing that.
Is it only, can we only name production cities though because we're in the central region? Like if somebody joins in Los Angeles, do they also get to?
I believe their only choice is New York.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain though.
Okay.
And I believe in New York, it's only Los Angeles.
But yeah, from a Chicago perspective.
So really, from a Chicago perspective, you're in, your best case scenario because you can pick either one. Yeah. You can pick what's best for you. Which, Brian, that's how you worked on Mayans, right? I assume.
Right. Yeah. My production city is Los Angeles. So yeah, I actually worked on Mayans as a local, which means I had to pay my way to be there, with room and board and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it was worth it.
But with that being said, if you are attached to a director of photography and they really like you and they've got a movie all over the world and they say, come on, we're going to go do this movie, you can do it. And the production, you're going to make a boatload of money and hopefully have a good time.
It just depends on the budget of the movie, really. I mean, if you have the money to pay for you and someone goes to bat, then yeah, it's easy. But if it's a smaller budget thing, which I have done one small budget movie in New York, and that was a thing. It wasn't as easy as getting hired and going. I got called from the DP, my buddy Luke Geisbuehler, and he called, and then he offered me the job, and then I had to figure out with our union calling Local 52 in New York, and then they had to essentially approve me because they didn't have the money to pay the penalties. So Local 52 let me work as a local because no one else in New York wanted to do the job, essentially. And it was I'm not going to get into it. It was different, but it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah. So from a union perspective, the answer is it easy to work on union shows? It depends, kind of. It's possible. It's not as easy as, jumping on a plane, going wherever you want. There are some rules. That's part of what it means to be in a union.
Right.
And you learn those rules, as you join the union, and they give you the rule book. It's customs and bylaws. That's the rules everybody has to play by. Any advice about breaking into or getting started as a digital imaging technician?
Well,
start as a loader.
First, I want to clarify that a digital imaging technician is not the same thing as a digital loader, because I think there's a lot of confusion about that in schools and outside of the union. A digital imaging technician, which is called DIT for short, is not just offloading the footage. That's what a digital loader does. They take the footage, they offload it, they back it up, make multiple copies, and they send it out to the production office, the post house, whoever is receiving the footage. The digital imaging technician sometimes they do offload the footage, but their main job on a set is to do live color. Alan, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the union DIT position is a very, very highly skilled job. They make a lot of money. I think they're the second highest paid person in the camera department behind a camera operator. And it's not by much. It's only like a couple dollars. Yeah. It's a very highly skilled job. It's a very difficult job. You got to really, really, really know your stuff to be a DIT. So getting started as a DIT, I would say I'm not a digital imaging technician, I should say. I know a number of people who are, and it's a job that I like and that I care about, but I'm not a digital imaging technician. With that being said, I think there's two parts to the job. There's the technical aspect of things. So you got to be an expert colorist. You have to really know how digital images work. You got to know everything there is to know about the digital cameras, how they create the image, what's going to happen if I increase my ISO from 800 to 1000 or things like that. How's that going to change the image? You need to know everything about the digital process. You as a digital imaging technician also know a lot about the post process. So you are directly interfacing with the post house. You're interfacing with the dailies technicians, the dailies supervisors, all that stuff. Editorial, you're dealing with editorial as well. So there's a tremendous high bar of technical knowledge that you need to do. I would say it's probably one of the most technical jobs in the camera department, and that's saying something. On the other hand, a good digital imaging technician can blend right into the set with everybody else. They know how a set works. They know very intimately how a set works. Again, this was especially true on Fargo. I'm sure, Tasha, you can maybe jump in. But the director of photography and the DIT are pretty much attached at the hip.
Yes.
So you need to know how to speak to DITs, directors of photography. You need to know how to talk to them. You need to know when is a good time to talk to them, when is not a good time to talk to them. You need to be able to interpret their abstract ideas of make this image feel a certain way and then translate. You're a craftsperson. You need to understand the storytelling, but you also need to understand the technical side of things. My advice to anybody who wants to pursue being a digital imaging technician would be two-part. One, first get a job as a digital utility, and also as a loader. Start from the bottom, because that's where you really learn how the set works, and that's how you understand the time management and the expectation of speed, which is really important. I mean, as a DIT, people cannot be waiting on you. So understanding the expectation of speed is really important. Understanding how the set flows is really important. Understanding what is expected of you is really important. And then on the other hand, you need to dive into your technical craft. You need to be a master at Avid. You need to be a master at DaVinci Resolve. You need to be a master at SilverStack, LiveGrade, Scratch. Like, oh my gosh, the list of programs is endless. You need to be a master at the digital cameras. You know the digital cameras better than the camera assistants do as a DIT. And also, you got to have a great attitude and a great personality, because you're going to be dealing with a lot of non-technical people. Your job,
besides being where the cameras are, they're on the next layer closest to set. They're right in the thick of it.
I mean, your job as a DIT is to take very technical stuff and translate it to very non-technical people. There's a lot of DPs who are very non-technical, and it's your job to bridge that gap. And then the other thing that I would suggest is find DITs who are working, and real, actual, done big budget movies, big TV shows, DITs, and ask to shadow them, ask to be on the set with them, ask them questions, because they're gonna really be able to give you answers on being successful in that job.
I want to point out that the first Candyman was the first production that I worked on that had a DIT, and Fargo was the second. So it's not on every show. I think it's definitely it's very, very specialized. And I know that there's only, Ellen and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there's few in town, because the demand is not huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially in Chicago, there is not a lot of demand for DITs, and a lot of DITs that are working in town also do other jobs in camera department. They are first ACs or they are digital loaders, because they can't or get work all the time as DITs.
Mm-hmm. I will say, I'm gonna make a guess that the DIT role you're gonna really see as a resurgence in the next couple of years, especially with all these streaming platforms. So all the streaming platforms now are demanding 4K deliverables. All the streaming platforms are demanding HDR mastering, and some people are even monitoring on the set in 4K, and some people are monitoring on the set in HDR. Which is this new, wave of technology that's coming. And if you want to be at that forefront of technology, best way to do it is be a DIT. Make yourself valuable, and you will be valued. So know the set and know the technology. That's the perfect blend of those two things. And it's funny you mentioned, Tasha, your 2 jobs having a DIT. My first union job ever had a DIT. And then every job since then has not had one. And then my most recent job had a DIT, and that was it.
Yeah,
it's very few and far between. All right, we got one or two more questions here, and then I have one last question for our panelists, and then we can wrap it up. So, because I know everybody has lives to go live. Are there any opportunities for documentary work in the union, or is that more of an indie route? And then building off of that, do you guys personally have any union documentary experience? How did that differ from narrative work? I don't. I have no documentary experience.
And documentary filmmaking is like why I went to film school. And it is still my first love, and something I hope I will go back to. In my experience, no, I've never had an opportunity to do documentary union experience. But if I did, I would be the first person in line, really and truly.
I honestly wonder if documentaries would even ever flip union, though. I would assume the majority of them aren't union because they're so small crew, and they run for any unknown amount of time, whether that be a month to 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's such a different way of working. I think the contracts that the unions currently have negotiated with the studios and with production companies, those would have to come up with different contracts to fit most documentaries, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no experience.
Ask Dana. She knows much better than any of us do. All right, two more questions for you guys. This is a question from the YouTube channel. What are each of your guys' goals career-wise? Do you guys eventually want to direct? Do you want to shoot? Are you happy where you are?
I mean, I want to continue keying. I've just now started to actually do that more full time, and I just want to keep, like I was saying earlier, I think it's important to constantly kind of be nervous going to the next job, because if you're nervous, you're challenging yourself. And I just want to keep working on bigger and bigger stuff, and continue to work with my friends and keep my friends working.
I want to in the immediate future, I want to continue to be a gaffer, and ride that out, and get as far as I can in Chicago. But ultimately, I know I want to be a cinematographer and a documentary filmmaker, whether that's documentary cinematography, or I think someday I could see myself directing documentaries. But I know the eventual goal is cinematography, sooner rather than later. Again, like I said before, it's kind of this constant, and back and forth.
Great. Brian?
I'm happy where I'm at. I've gotten to the position that I want to be in. It's just a matter of growth now. Bigger productions, whatnot. Movies ultimately is my goal, but in Chicago there's not a whole lot of those. So, but yeah, a camera, Steadicam is where I want to be.
Great. Ella?
Yeah, ultimately I want to become a cinematographer as well. And I love pretty much every single position in the camera department, with the exception of DIT. I don't want to put in the time to tackle that. But I'm very happy working my way up the ladder, so to speak, to get to that position.
Yeah. Great.
Alan, what do you want to do?
I guess, yeah, for me, so like I said earlier, I just, within the past couple months, I've gotten the opportunity to start pulling focus on studio jobs, which I'm really fortunate, and I have to, thank my A guys, who I'm sure are not watching this, but I'll just throw out a thanks to them. Yeah, right. This is me totally kissing their boots. No, they took a chance on me, and I expressed an interest. I said I would really love an opportunity to pull focus, and they said, all right, we're going to give you a day. And then one day turned into 2 days, and turned into 3, and it turned into almost 6 episodes worth of pulling focus, which was awesome. So Brian was my operator on my first day as a focus puller.
I've got to say, you killed it, Alan. You did a great job. Seriously. I mean, better than a good handful of the day player first ACs that I've worked with. So, yeah, you definitely have a future in it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep hacking away at it. With that being said, though, I'm very conscious of rising too quickly. I like learning from people who are better than me. I like learning from the people around me. So before the world stopped, I was in line to do on a pilot as a second assistant, and the operator, the A operator, was somebody I was really looking forward to working with. He had done the Tom Cruise movie Oblivion, and he had done a bunch of other movies that I recognize. So I was excited to work for him and support him and learn from him as well as the focus puller who hired me. I'm 2 for 2 on Los Angeles focus pullers now, which is kind of cool. And yeah, so I'm personally, I'm just taking it as it comes. Ultimately, I'd like to pull focus on the A camera and be an A camera first assistant. But until then, I'm just, every job I get, I try to learn something from it and be challenged by it. And also to bring something to the table and, elevate the production as a whole. Great. All right. Well, so before we sign off, I do, and I'm sorry for pulling the rug out from everybody, but is anybody opposed to me posting either email addresses or a way of contact for people to reach out to the students who are watching, whether that be, reach out to me on Facebook, or here's my email address. I know we should have already talked about this, but
email is fine for me.
Yeah, email is great. I'm always happy to talk and answer questions.
Okay.
Yeah, email good for me too.
Okay, Ella.
Yeah, email or find us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna post everybody's email addresses, and also, if you'd like, reach out to people's social media. And I want to leave everybody with one last question for everybody from the group, which Brian, you and I talked about just a little bit before this started. What's your best, or what's a good like, oh shit, I'm gonna get fired story? Like, my career is over.
Yeah, it was on Exorcist. Alex Disanoff, DP. I don't know. It was like 5 a.m. or something, and there was a moment where my operator was asking for a lens change, and then at the same time, Alex wanted to move a mark. The mark he wanted it to be moved maybe 6 inches from where it was, and at that time, we were all just, it was like hour 14, all ready to go home, I had the tape roll in my hand and I had the lens in my hand. Walked by Alex and he said, "Hey Brian, can you move this mark?" And instead of saying, "Yeah, I'll be right there, I'll move it," I threw the tape roll at his shins and said, "You do it." And immediately I was like, "Oh, that's it, I'm fired." But I think he knew better. He knew what was going on. He knew the pressure we were under, and we hugged at the end of the night, and everything was fine. But
sweating for a moment there.
Yeah, a little bit.
I've got one. This was on Fargo, and we were shooting at a slaughterhouse. And I knew I wasn't gonna get fired, but it was. So it was this really complicated dolly move, and it involved a handheld lighting gag. So I was hand holding a light called the Cream Source, one of my least favorite lights ever, with the Chimera on it. And we tested it out a couple times, and it was like the dolly grip was giving me a verbal cue, and then I was like popping up from underneath this like counter and lighting a guy in a chair and then holding it till the shot ended, whatever. And so it's like take one, and we're doing it, and my boss, Mike Moyer's in my ear, and he's saying, "Tasha, I need more light." And so I'm using like one of my hands to like kind of slowly crank the dial, and he's going, "More light, Tasha, more light, Tasha, more light, Tasha." And on the dial, I'm at 100%. And, obviously I can't speak because there's a scene going on. And so we finish, and him and Dana, the DP, they come in, and they're like, "What the hell? That didn't work at all." And, when they're kind of trying to figure out what to do and how to change the levels, I look down, and I realized that the light was not on. And so I go, "You guys, just give me one more shot. It's going to be better this time." And they're like, what is going to be different? I said, "This time the unit will be on. Okay, thank you so much. I'm so sorry. That's it." So there's mine. And it was like, I turned it off to save battery, and it did not turn it back on. But that's one of my least favorite things about that light, is that it still gives you a readout, even if the fixture is not actually on.
We'll get Cream Source on the phone. We'll tell them Tasha does not approve.
I could go on about Cream Source. So
All right, Ella, Dave.
I mean, I honestly can't think of one. I mean, I very openly run around saying no one gets fired on these sets. You know what I mean? Like you have to do something pretty bad. And I don't know that I've ever even been yelled at so bad that I cowered. I honestly can't remember a time ever.
How about this? We'll do the other hand. I don't know, what's what's a favorite set memory from your years?
It gets to look awesome, and we look like a bunch of.
Yeah.
The
But
schmoes are
your
a lot
worst
more
set
fun.
memory.
You guys are
Yeah, what's a terrible day that you worked on? There we go.
Here, I can answer mine to give Dave some time to think. So for me, and I'm sure I've had more, but the one that comes to mind most vividly is back when I was camera PAing on Empire. I was so excited to work. It was like a predominantly female camera department. I was very excited about that. And they had moisturizer on their camera cart, which was like amazing because guys don't carry that for some dumb reason. And so I like used some of their moisturizer and put it on my hands because the stages are dry and your hands get cracked. And I didn't want to have that. So I like put this moisturizer in my hands. And then like a minute or so later, they called for a lens, and Empire is weird where like anybody in the camera department can bring the lens over. So I grabbed the lens and I brought it over, but I like wasn't used to how heavy those lenses were yet. So I like palmed it with a bunch of moisturizer on my hand, and I brought it over to them, and they were like, they put it on the camera, and then they were like, why is there a huge smudge on the front of this? And I was like, and they were like, go clean this. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. And I was sure that I was not going to get a call sheet for the next day that I was scheduled, but I kept getting them.
That reminds me of a story. It wasn't a matter of getting fired, but it's similar to what you're talking about. I was still in school. Scott Thiel brought me out on a spec spot that someone was shooting. He was keying, and I was so green then. I didn't know anything. And the DP asked for a broken 1x1 mirror, which is it's the 1 foot by 1 foot mirror that you break, and it gives you a different reflection. And he goes, we didn't have one, so all right, go make one. All right, cool. So I go make one. I cut the foam core, put it on there, tape it, and then maybe I just gaff taped the back, and then I broke it, and I brought it in, and they're all like, because it's all like mangled and it's loose, it's all just broken glass that's taped together, and they're like, that's super dangerous. You should maybe go do it again. And Scott Thiel had to go teach me how to make a 1x mirror. But I just brought it in, and it's just like falling apart, glass is like falling out of it, like practically cutting people, and just looked like an idiot.
That's awesome.
But I mean, I don't know. I've never been close to getting fired, I guess.
Yeah. I'm sure nobody really has.
Yeah.
But it's fun to feel like that sometimes.
Shit moment where you're like, oh no, I'm gonna have to tell them about this, and I'm gonna hear about it. I'm gonna look terrible.
But that story, with that being said, if a piece of advice before we go is, if you really don't know something, you shouldn't copy that you're going to do it. Or if you don't know what a piece of gear is, you shouldn't be the one grabbing it. Or you have to be honest and be like, I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. What is it? Because if you come in with the wrong piece of gear, nothing makes you look like it distances you from a crew so fast because you don't know what you're doing and you're not able to ask for help. And I think that will be a universal piece of advice for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People are happy to help you if you ask for help. What they're not cool with is you saying, you got this, and you totally don't have it.
Well, and it brings up another thing a piece of advice that I like to give that was never given to me, is throughout your career, people are going to be teaching you how to do things, and people are going to reteach you how to do things over and over and over again. And ultimately, people that you're working with for the first time, they're gauging what what you do or don't know. So if someone teaches you how to tie a clove hitch for the 10th time, it is never a good look for you to say, oh, I know that. It's a better look for you just to swallow your pride, let them teach you the clove hitch. And then if you want to show that you know it and be like, yeah, I've done it that's great. Have you also done it this way? And you show them a different way, or, like to add to the conversation versus shutting it down, saying that you know it. No one likes a know-it-all, regardless if you actually know how to do it or not.
Oh yeah.
It's better to let them teach you, and maybe they'll teach you a new version of it that you actually didn't know. But it's better to continue the conversation than to shut it down saying you know how to do something, because then they're not going to help you, and then they're not going to want to bring you back, and it's it's a thing.
Totally.
Egos.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, like I said before, we kind of all know your level of expertise when you first come out. I mean, within the first 20 minutes of the day, we already know. So it's better just to swallow that pride and go along with it and just be open to criticism or ask questions and all that stuff. Rather than trying to act like you know it all.
Yeah.
People
Great.
are
Well,
okay with people not
go ahead,
knowing. Sorry. Well, people are okay with people not knowing. Like, we know you're a student. We know you're new. The issue comes when you act like you know things or think that you know more than you do.
Right.
Yeah, because you don't.
Right.
And
You
even,
think you know.
We're more than happy to teach too. There's
But-
always opportunity for teaching moments throughout the day, even if it's super crazy busy.
But again, like even if you do know it, it's better just to continue the conversation than to say you know it, purely for the fact that it makes you look more classy and it continues the conversation versus shutting one down. And I think that translates to every career there is.
Yeah.
I don't think that's specifically film. If you go on to do something else, that's just life. That's just,
And then you'll find out that there is more than one way of doing certain things too, and you'll build up your own sort of toolbox on how to do things. And there's still going to be somebody that, even though you've been doing it some way for 5-6 years or whatever, there's going to be somebody that's going to want to teach you how to do it their way. And like Dave said, swallow the pride and sort of let them do that and move on, or, explain to them how you do it, blah, blah, blah. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, I do also have a I'm so fired story. Which Brian, you were there for. This was it was a low budget movie in town that had a couple big name actors in it, and I was not staff on the job, but I was pretty much their first call day player, so I'd been out there a lot for the job. I prepped the job too, so I knew the crew really well, and I was coming out as a utility probably about 3-4 times a week. And for whatever reason, this job was cursed from the beginning. And they had nothing but problems the whole show. And they had a day, I don't remember what the circumstances were, but they were doing a 3-camera day. It was a Friday. It was a very clear memory of it being a Friday. And for whatever reason, all 3 of their second assistants were gone, or they had bumped up focus, or they were out of town, or I don't know what happened. But so they brought me in to second assist, and they put me on the A camera for some reason. I think it was my first day as a second assistant, actually, if not one of my first 3 days. And it was 3 day player second assistants. And we go to do this scene, and they're like, all right, we're going to mark this scene. And it was just this totally rushed marking rehearsal. And it was outside, it was on pavement, and we had 1 roll of gaff tape. And gaff, for those of you who don't know, gaff tape sticks much better to the ground than paper tape in a lot of cases. We'd run 1 roll of gaff tape between all 3 of us. It was a very incomplete roll of tape. And we didn't know any of the actors' colors. We had no idea who any of the colors were. We didn't know any of the actors. We had, and this show had been going on for a couple weeks now. We didn't know any of the actors. We didn't know any of their colors. It was all 3 of us going, and those motherfuckers, the B camera and the C camera, second AC, they straight up when they're, well, you're the A guy, so good luck. And we just did a terribly haphazard marking rehearsal. And there were so many characters, and a lot of them were actually extras that for some reason they had brought into the marking rehearsal to be background people. But I didn't know that because I'd never been on this job, and also I had never really been a second assistant before, so I didn't know how to pick out who's who. And there were so many marks, and we just did a terrible, horrible job, and it was just a disaster of a marking rehearsal. And it was totally incomplete, and it just looked like a train wreck on the ground. And I have a very clear memory of being done with this and basically running out of tape at the same time, and then turning my head and seeing Brian all the way in the back. Brian was operating the C camera, and seeing Brian go.
Well, to your credit, though, Alan, that whole day was a train wreck. So,
Oh, it was terrible. It was probably one of the worst days.
and that was an overnight too, I believe.
Yes, it was. Mhm.
Wrapped at 3 or 4 in the morning or something.
And you know what was great about that job is we marked that scene, marked it, left, went and did other stuff because
Oh,
we're like,
right.
we're going to come back to this later. And then we came back and then they did a wet down and they
Right.
washed all the marks away.
And then I think it was remarked afterwards. Anyway,
Yep, it was. But it was terrible. And like Brian, you know, I had never worked with Brian before, and I knew Brian was the A camera second on Chicago Fire, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's it, I'm done. I'm never working with Brian ever again. Like my career is over. And
it was
Sure
all
not.
good. It happens.
yeah, happens to everybody. So
Yeah.
all right, I think that's it. I think we've rambled on long enough. Thank you guys, everybody on the YouTube stream who stuck with us at this point. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Please, if you have any other questions, I'm sorry that we didn't get hit all the questions. There were tons of questions. We tried to do our best. Please reach out to all of us, reach out to any of these panelists. You know, they're all DePaul grads and they're all really cool people and they all want to help, you know, help current students, especially now. I mean, we're not doing anything right now. So
Truly.
so please feel free to reach out to everybody. You know, we're happy to help. That's all why we're here. And then guys, all the panelists, thank you guys so much for coming and, you know, using your time. You know, Brian, you got your young one with you.
Handful
So,
here.
you know, really appreciate it from everybody. So thank you guys. I think that's it for me. If anyone else wants to say anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for
Put it together, Alan. Thank you.
Yeah, myself, Ella, as well as the DePaul Society of Cinematographer people. So thank you guys very much.
Bye.
All right, have a
Bye.
good one. Bye-bye.